after me, they're after you, I'm just in the way. In other words, he wants his supporters to see attacks on him as attacks on them. But, I really, 2016, a lot of questions, of course, about the polls, right? No one expected Trump to win. The polls are looking a lot worse for him now.
Yeah, exactly. He's got some challenges ahead. And thank you so much to Josh Wingrove. We have a second hour over on Radio, A Balance of Power, and this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Elon Musk is now richer than Warren Buffett. The fortune of Tesla's chief executive officer rose $6.1 billion on Friday, according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. Musk is not only the highest paid CEO in the U.S. with a $595 million payday earlier this year, he's now the world's seventh richest person, also ahead of tech titans Larry Ellison and Sergey Brin. In other wealth news, former New York Yankees star Alex Rodriguez and actress Jennifer Lopez are behind the group that has offered about $1.7 billion to buy Major League Baseball's Mets, according to the New York Post. In art news, a nude by Roy Lichtenstein led Christie's relay-style auction that played out virtually in 4 cities around the globe. The live-streamed event, which has been postponed from May due to the pandemic, produced $421 million in sales over 4 hours and drew 20,000 visitors while setting 7 auction records. I'm Andrew Ote, Bloomberg Radio.
The doors are opening.
When is that moment out in the distant future?
Some things will be as they were, others forever changed.
The restaurant industry will never be the same.
Follow every new development here on Bloomberg Radio.
What do we need in terms of maybe the new school of economic thought?
Because the next best thing to magic is insight.
It may take nearly a decade for the U.S. economy to recover.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You know your body, and you know when something's off, when something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Poses a serious risk to the...
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. It is an up day on Wall Street with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all pushing higher. S&P up right now by 5 points. That is a gain of 0.2%. Stocks are advancing. Trading is volatile. Energy, material, and industrial sectors leading today's gains. Crude oil also rebounding from earlier lows. West Texas Intermediate up 0.4% right now, $40.28 a barrel. S&P 500 has been swinging all morning between gains and losses. Right now, a gain of 6 points, up 0.2%. The Dow up 256, up by 1%. NASDAQ is down again, falling 44 points, a drop now of 0.4%. NASDAQ heading for its first 2-day slide since mid-May. We've got the 10-year yield at 0.60%, up 5/30 seconds. Gold up 0.4%, $18.09 the ounce. And with more on commodities trading today, here's Bloomberg's Renita Young.
OPEC expects demand for its crude oil to rebound sharply next year, surging by 25% to average 29.8 million barrels a day, surpassing levels seen before the coronavirus crisis. While the increase is partly driven by a recovery in global oil demand as economic growth resumes, an even bigger factor is the misfortune of OPEC's competitors who struggle to revive output. After slumping 7.4% this year, the U.S. will see only limited production growth in 2021, the report showed. In the meantime, OPEC and its allies are cutting production to clear the glut left behind by the COVID-19 crisis and prop up prices. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
Bank stocks are trading lower. J.P. Morgan Chase just turning a negative, down now by 2 cents, little changed. Citigroup after earnings this morning down 2.6%. Wells Fargo down 5.4%. J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo all setting aside almost $28 billion for bad loans in the second quarter, a mark only surpassed by the last 3 months of 2008. That, of course, during the depths of the financial crisis. 102 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. Looking at ADRs at this point, we're seeing some of the fluctuations that we're seeing in stocks. For the moment, though, ADR solidly higher. The S&P ADR index up 1%, and the S&P 500 is only higher by 0.1%. Sweden's Ericsson has risen 2.2%, and Finland's Nokia has gained 3% in U.S. trading. The makers of phone network equipment are higher after the U.K. banned mobile companies from installing gear from China's Huawei Technologies after year-end. The regulations will give phone companies 7 years to replace Huawei equipment now in use, and that timetable led to gains for ADRs of UK phone companies. Vodafone Group is up 2.5%, and BT Group is also up 2.5%. While Huawei isn't publicly traded, ADRs of other Chinese phone equipment makers are lower. Xiaomi is down 2.9%, and ZTE is down 4.4% in limited trading. Now, gold mining ADRs are higher, along with the precious metal, which has rebounded from a 1-week low in New York trading. Canada's Barrick Gold has risen 1.9%, and Kinross Gold is up 3.3%. South Africa's AngloGold Ashanti is up 3.7%, and Harmony Gold Mining is up 7.5%, Charlie.
Dave Wilson, and again recapping here, we've got the Dow, the S&P higher, NASDAQ is lower, S&P up 3, a gain of about 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
States start to shut back down as coronavirus cases continue to rise. Congress struggles to figure out what more it can do for the economy, and the U.S. runs an historic deficit because of the stimulus already approved. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. The United States deficit soared to a record $864 billion in the month of June because of the money Congress pumped into the economy, taking the total to $3 trillion for the first 9 months of the fiscal year, with more on the horizon as Congress considers further help. We welcome now Maya McGinnis. She is president of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. So, Maya, thank you so much for joining us. Give us your take on this deficit. Most people say we sort of have no choice.
Yeah, I agree with most people on that. We definitely do have no choice, really. So the huge monthly numbers that we just saw yesterday, record-setting borrowing, is no surprise because of the policies we put in place. It's the right thing to do because we need to be borrowing this much to help prop up the economy. But it is really worth taking a moment and just contemplating how much money the country is borrowing and not to fool ourselves into thinking that it is free or has no cost or has no consequences. So it's absolutely the moment we should be borrowing to help fight the fact that people can't return to work, that people are suffering real hardships, that we need to be fighting the pandemic. But the final stage of this entire effort is going to have to be dealing with the mountains of debt that we have created once the economy is strong enough and in full recovery so that we can turn our attention to bringing that debt back down to manageable levels, because it is a mountain of debt right now.
There was a time, Maya, I remember, I'm sure you do, we had things called bond vigilantes. And one of the disciplines that got applied is because interest rates would go up, and therefore the service on the debt rose. You said it's not free. It almost kind of is free at the moment, isn't it, given what the Fed is doing?
Well, there's a difference between at the moment and is it actually free. So borrowing has very, very low cost right now. We're able to borrow, and that means you can hold on to that debt at very low cost. But it doesn't mean the trillion or 2 trillion or 3 trillion that you borrow disappears. It still has to be repaid. So the cost of delaying paying for something is very cheap, but the cost of the thing still exists. And so when it comes right down to it, when a government is going to spend money or cut taxes, you need to figure out how you're going to offset those costs. And if you're going to borrow, even with low interest rates, there still is a cost. It's just a cost. Oftentimes, we're shifting into the future. That makes sense when there's a recession. We should be shifting those costs in the future. It doesn't as an ongoing policy strategy. And it's worth noting, we were borrowing trillions of dollars when the economy was strong as well. And that was shifting costs in the future with no justifiable reason for doing that.
Yeah, a really good point. The debt didn't begin with this crisis by a long shot. We were already well into debt. Well, your organization has named a committee for a responsible federal budget. Give us a sense of what a responsible federal plan would be going forward. Not that we're going to turn it around today or next week or next month or next year, but typically if you start early over time, you can really make a difference. What should we be looking at?
Absolutely. So the first step is recognizing we made a mistake by all the reckless borrowing during the economic expansion, and we should learn from that mistake and not repeat it. The second step is acknowledging and accepting we have to borrow a whole lot of money right now. It's the right thing to do. Let's not turn that borrowing off prematurely, because that would have profound, devastating effects on the economy. But the third step is as soon as the economy is strong enough, and that will be demonstrated by things like GDP growth, unemployment levels. The Fed will also need to have the capacity to help respond. We will need to make policy choices to get the debt so it's no longer growing faster than the economy. That means looking at new revenues. That means slowing the growth of healthcare costs. That means dealing with Social Security and other programs with trust funds that are underfunded. And it means something we don't see very often, compromising. Nobody's going to love these plans. They're going to be hard, but we have to get real about the fiscal health of this country. It's something that we've delayed on for decades now. And while interest rates that are so low kind of lull people into complacency, when the music stops, this could be a very painful landing if we don't take the opportunity to get control of the debt as soon as the economy allows us to do that.
Everything you said, at least to me, makes perfectly good sense. But politically, how do you get that done? Because each one of those responsible things you listed would cause some pain to some constituents. It's not the way you get reelected to Congress or to the Senate to say we're going to really cut some health care, we're really going to cut some Social Security benefits or Medicare or Medicaid. So how do you construct this in such a way that politically that's doable by elected representatives?
Yeah, that's absolutely the crux of the problem at this point, which is good fiscal policy doesn't make good politics. And unfortunately, the focus on politics, and particularly partisan politics in a polarized moment, that's what's winning the day. And we've seen this over the years. Things have become more hostile between the two parties. And in fact, in order for us to get to a point where we can focus on getting control of the national debt, we're going to have to get to a point where bipartisan efforts and a willingness to confront hard choices is once again possible. We're working on an effort called Fix Us that is actually looking at how you try to bridge the divides between the two parties and recognize that this country's success depends on us having shared ambitions or aspirations or goals and fiscal policies instead of this constant duking it out and battle, which is becoming part of Washington. So I'm not sure I know how to do that. I know we have to do that, because unless we can make the answer that this is good politics, politicians will continue to kick the can.
Just very briefly at the end, what about bipartisan commissions? Because I think that was done with base closings at one point in Social Security, and that seemed to get past some of the politics.
Yeah, that has been one of the things that's really helped you kind of outsource the hard choices. There's a terrific bipartisan bicameral bill out there called the Trust Act, which says any any policy, any program that has trust funds that is not solvent, we need to appoint a commission to deal with that. I think that will be a terrific way to get the discussion started and start to address these problems.
Yeah. But start it we must, even in the middle of the crisis. Thank you so much to Maya McGinnis of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Coming up, renters on the brink. Bloomberg Opinion's Noah Smith is here on what a wave of evictions could mean for the economy. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Reopenings.
Is there a likelihood that we have a sustained recovery?
Requirements.
Lawmakers have passed sweeping legislation.
Returns.
The president signed an executive order.
Bloomberg Daybreak with Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
We continue our Bloomberg Radio team coverage.
Everything you need now.
Let's head to Washington now.
Bloomberg Daybreak. Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern. On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg. The world is listening.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
The best of Bloomberg Business Week every business day.
We've got a market sell-off that's spreading around the globe.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day, Carol.
The day's breaking global business, finance, and tech news, along with smart analysis.
We know the Fed is going to be sure and steady.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast.
A great scoop on the terminal.
Listen today on BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
The world's fine.
Whether you're dreaming of a house the size of a football stadium or a football stadium in the back garden of your house, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, tonight's Euro Millions jackpot is £23 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Short on time? Don't worry. You can still get your cook on with Asda. Get 3 Asda ready meals for just £5.50. Like our beef lasagna or our tomato and mozzarella panette bake. Hang up your oven gloves, we've got dinner covered. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Meals 400 grams, £2.10 each.
Get ready for the University of Bedfordshire. We've got all you need to make ambition become reality. To make lifelong friendships. To make contacts in your chosen industry. To make a name for yourself. To make it. In fact, we've got everything except your application. So get it in, sit back and relax. Wait, actually, check out our generous scholarships and bursaries for support at every step at beds.ac.uk. Okay, now you can relax.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet, just getting word that Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to charges that she helped her longtime friend, financier Jeffrey Epstein, run a sex trafficking scheme targeting girls as young as 14. The British socialite entering her plea today in her first hearing before a federal judge in Manhattan, where she will also be arguing to be released from custody on $5 million bail ahead of trial. Stocks are trading higher. Stocks, however, have pared gains after crude oil retreated from the highs of the day. West Texas Intermediate now up by about 6 cents. It is up by almost 0.2%, $40.16 a barrel. We've got gold up $6 the ounce, higher by 0.3%, $18.08 on the precious metal. 10-year up 4/32, the yield now 0.60%. Equities trading lower. Equities trading mixed, I should say. It's NASDAQ that's trading lower. Could see back-to-back declines there. NASDAQ down another 45 points, down 0.4%. S&P up 3, up 0.1, and the Dow up 221, up 0.9%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is time now for Bloomberg Opinion, and today we welcome columnist Noah Smith, who has a column out about the ugly topic of evictions. Noah, welcome. And before we get into what you propose or the issues you raise, you have some statistics in here that I found stunning, which is 46.8% of U.S. renter households spent more than 30% of their income on housing, and in the bottom quintile, it's more than half. I had not realized it really hits particularly the lower earning households particularly hard.
Oh, absolutely. We have a big rent crisis in this country.
Yeah, and now that's exacerbated, obviously, by the downturn, by the enormous unemployment, something like 18 million, something like that, still unemployed. So what is the danger that we're facing?
Well, the danger is a big wave of evictions. I mean, there have been a number of eviction moratoriums. The CARES Act, the federal relief bill, had a provision that basically some federally supported properties couldn't evict tenants, and then there have been some state and local anti-eviction mandates, but those are expiring. They never covered everybody, and they're hard to enforce in court, especially during coronavirus when many courts have cut back on operations. And so, evictions are up, and if nothing changes, they're set to really soar in the coming months, and that's a bad thing for our economy.
So what is the incentive for a landlord to evict in this particular economic climate? Because it's not clear they're going to find somebody else to move right in and pay the rent, are they?
Right. That's a great question. One possibility is that landlords are simply operating on autopilot from the way they behaved before, and they feel that they have to crack down, and if a tenant doesn't pay rent, you have no choice but to evict. It's possible that, eviction threats are empty threats, but it's also possible they'll evict. Another possibility is that they will convert the properties to condos and sell them to, Russian or Chinese speculators, so that the properties just sort of sit empty and sit on the market as a vehicle for real estate speculation, possibly by foreign investors, while people then have nowhere to live and essentially either become homeless or go live with their family or something like that.
Do we have any sense yet whether evictions are on the rise? I have not seen statistics. I just don't know.
Evictions are on the rise, but it hasn't been a huge wave yet because the moratoriums have been pretty widespread. So that's prevented some. The CARES Act has supported income so that poverty in terms of income has actually fallen. So even so, we have seen like a small rise in evictions, and we could, at exactly the time when we don't need that, and we could see a much bigger one soon.
So take us through some of the things you think might make sense to try to deal with this very, very difficult situation.
There's obviously two ways you can deal with it. The first way is to say you're not allowed to evict people, and if you lose rent, just apply to the PPP or, other government relief. And so bail out landlords while letting tenants not pay rent. A second solution is rental assistance. So in addition to the money we're giving people who are unemployed, we give people money for, to pay their rent. Both of these have big problems because in terms of giving people money to pay rent, the same things that are preventing us from getting out the money to all the unemployed people will also prevent us from getting money out to all the rent-burdened people. And as for eviction moratoriums, we have this federalist system that makes it very difficult to have, a federal eviction moratorium that, covers everybody and to enforce that with the courts. But we should probably try both anyway and try them pretty vigorously because if we don't, we could have a major crisis on our hands.
No, do you know whether there's any provision made for this in the so-called HEROES Act that was passed by the House? It's definitely not passed by the Senate. That is Nancy Pelosi's solution for the fourth round.
I don't. Let me check that real quick. The problem is that the Republicans aren't going to pass it.
Yeah.
And, it's just going nowhere. Basically it has a much stronger eviction moratorium in it, but it's not clear whether that'll make it into the final bill or whether that bill will ever even get through the Senate.
And Noah, do you also know whether this is showing up in the financial markets yet? Because obviously you have a lot of real estate investment trusts. You have a lot of companies who are invested as landlords. What's happening? What is the market doing in discounting what's going to happen with the renters who can't pay?
A lot of commercial landlords are in trouble, and a lot of property management companies are in trouble. A lot have been getting government relief through the PPP. They've been taking out the Fed loans and things like that. So currently, a lot of them are being bailed out. But one problem is that those bailouts are often not conditional, so that you can get bailed out and you can evict tenants. And so it's not necessarily bailing these people out just unconditionally isn't necessarily stopping them from evicting tenants. And so it's easy to imagine a system where we give preferential bailouts to companies that, have voluntary anti-eviction policies where they say, okay, until 2021, we just agree not to evict anybody. And so then they get first in line for bailouts and maybe bigger bailouts.
Yeah, is the problem much bigger because since the great financial crisis, a lot more people rent than used to, right? They went away from buying.
That is a problem, yeah. Home ownership dropped by a few points. And but I think really the problem is that rents have risen relative to incomes. And so we've essentially got these two kinds of cities. We've got these superstar cities like San Francisco where just all the tech workers and whoever moves in and then they didn't build enough housing.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, Noah. I really appreciate it. That's Bloomberg Opinion columnist Noah Smith. You can read more on this and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing in OPI and go. Coming up, we're going to talk about what comes next in fighting the coronavirus. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mixed, lifted by energy, material, and industrial industries. The Dow was up 250 points, S&P up 5, but the Nasdaq is down 45 points. The coronavirus pandemic has taken a big toll on the country's airlines. Today, Delta posted a quarterly loss of almost $3 billion. And with new spikes in COVID-19 cases, Delta says it will only add about half of the number of flights it planned for August. The three big banks, J.P. Morgan, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo, set aside nearly $28 billion for bad loans in the second quarter. The total was more than expected. And the National Federation of Independent Business reports small business optimism rose last month by the most since 2016. Sales expectations led the advance, posting a record gain. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
The market's in focus every business day. The Bloomberg Markets Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
Market sell-off glowing global once again.
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
What's the thought on Apple here?
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
There's very, very disturbing dynamics at work.
Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn. Subscribe today at BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or iTunes.
Where are today's real testing grounds for the latest in...
How do we control coronavirus now? This is Scott. He's a nurse.
NHS Test and Trace helps stop the spread of the virus in our communities. If you've got symptoms, even mild ones, get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we can trace the people you've been in contact with and contain the virus. So get tested and protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Tuesday evening by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without? With? Without? With? Without? Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors? The new Honda E with wind cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, tune in as the latest guidelines from the CDC. Indoor gatherings. Wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Don't share food, toys, or other items, and avoid shared surfaces. Open windows for better ventilation. Try to avoid gathering indoors as much as possible. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn. It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1968, Hank Aaron hits his 500th home run off of a San Francisco Giant, Mike McCormick.
After the All-Star game, Henry Aaron steals the headlines when he hits his 500th home run of his career. It comes against the Giants.
Hammer and Hank Aaron collected his 500th home run off Mike McCormick in July.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Are you fully informed on the NBA?
On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, shutting things down again. Dr. Bob Lahita of St. Joseph Healthcare System on the California approach to gaining control over the coronavirus. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
Hey, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. David Weston stocks trading mixed on this Tuesday, July 14th, with the S&P higher now, up 10. That is a gain of 0.4% at 3166. The Dow advancing 280 points, up 1.1%. NASDAQ lower right now, down 14, a drop there of 0.1%. We've got the 10-year up 3/30 seconds with a yield of 0.60%. Stocks paired gains after crude oil retreated from the highs of the day. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.1% right now, $40.14 a barrel. And we have got gold up 0.4%, $18.09 the ounce on the precious metal. Economic news, consumer prices are up, rising 0.6% in June, the largest monthly increase since 2012. And with more, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
The government's consumer price data show food costs continue to climb, squeezing fragile household finances during the pandemic. Gasoline prices are also up, accounting for more than half the gain, but remain 23% lower than last year. Excluding food and energy, core consumer prices rose a more moderate 0.2%. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
As I mentioned, NASDAQ is trading lower. Mega cap technology shares have been heading, or are heading, for their first two-day slide since mid-May as investors flee high flyers that powered a 40% rally from the pandemic lows among the so-called FANG names. Facebook shares, they are down now by 1%. Amazon down 2.2%. Apple shares up 0.2%. Amazon down 2.2%. Netflix down 1.7%. And Google, it is lower now by 0.7%. Recapping, equities are trading mixed. The Dow, the S&P higher, NASDAQ lower, S&P up 11, now a gain of 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. I'm David Weston. An alarming rise in COVID-19 cases in California has led the state to shut down indoor activities and cancel in-classroom instruction in the Los Angeles and San Diego school systems. Here to take us through what's being done around the country is Dr. Bob Lahita. He is chairman of medicine at St. Joseph Healthcare System. Dr. Lahita is also professor of medicine at New York Medical College. So, Doctor, welcome. It's good to have you here. I mean, I guess the question a lot of us have in our minds is, how can we get this genie back in the bottle? Because we thought we were ahead of this or getting ahead of it. Now it seems to be getting out of control again.
Yeah, it is getting out of control. And you know what? It's difficult to track people now because there are so many cases. The good news is that the death rate in all of these states, particularly Florida and Southern California, and I hope Texas, has sort of flattened out. So it's not that there's no deaths. It's just that they're in the 300 to 400 range instead of the 2,000 or 3,000 range per day. And so why that is happening is likely to be the fact that, number one, we are testing more people. Number two, we know how to manage the acutely ill patient. And number three, the type of patient is much younger than we saw up in the New York metropolitan area back when the pandemic first started. So those three factors mean a lot. However, as you point out, it's out of control. And so Gavin Newsom did the right thing. And I have to tell you, that's a very apolitical thing to do, is to close everybody down again and to prevent the kids from going to school, because I personally advocate that kids get back to school. So I don't know how he's going to handle that. I'm sure he's going to take a lot of grief from a lot of people.
So take us into that school. Let's go right there, because the president certainly has made a big deal of this. It's really a bone of contention in New York City and elsewhere across the country. You say you're in favor of it. Give us the reasons why you give for that.
Okay, so I'm in favor of it because children, as a rule, let's go from grade to grade. So preschoolers don't wear masks as a rule. You can imagine a 4 or 5 year old trying to keep a mask on them is impossible. So those kids do not, as a rule, get infected with the disease. The incidence of involvement of children of the elementary school age group is about 0.1 out of 100,000 versus 7 to 8 with the adult cadre of patients. So 7 to 8 out of 100,000 for adults, 0.1 in the childhood years. And I would say that it's probably a lot even lower than that. So these kids, in contradistinction to popular belief, are probably not transmitting the infection.
Well, sorry, Doctor, let me just interrupt because you're saying they can't transmit it either. I thought you were saying they can't get it. It is possible to transmit it without getting it, right?
Yeah, it's possible to transmit it, but there's no evidence that that's happened.
I see.
So most experts, most pediatricians are saying the need to have children be with each other in a social stance, going to school, meeting their friends, etc., on a daily basis is very, very much part of their normal health.
And you don't need to worry about the teachers getting it, or the older people getting it, or the family members back home.
No, that's where I was going to go there right now. You're ahead of me. And so as I go up the scale, I see kids that, say, are in the 7 and 8 year range, and they're going to wear masks, and they're going to keep socially distant. So what the schools should do, and they are doing this, they should really half the classes and make the 6-foot distancing between the children's desks logical and affordable. And maybe they can have shifts where some of the kids go in the morning, some of the kids go in the afternoon. When it gets to the college years, then you're dealing with a population that's more likely to harbor the infection and to get sick. But not necessarily, because we know below the age of 20, the incidence of infection is rather low. So you've got the millennials and the Gen X's that are going to be infected, and they can be very sick. And that's what's happening in Southern California and in Florida. That age group is the group that is testing positive, and very exceptionally, some of them get critically ill and die. And I said over and over these past few months that it's immunogenetics. It's the genetics of your immune system that determines whether you're going to die from this disease or not. The vast majority of people will have morbidity, that means side effects, either neural, cardiac, pulmonary, but they're not going to die. And couple that with the fact that we really know what we're doing now in handling this infection with remdesivir, steroids, IL-6 inhibitors, all these different drugs we're using acutely. So now we go back and we say, what are we really worried about when we send the kids back to school? What we really worry about are the teachers. And the teachers have contacted me in this area, the New York metropolitan area, and said, I'm really afraid to go back to school. Well, the vast majority of teachers are between the ages of, say, 20 and 40. So over 40 and 50 and 60-year-old teachers, the ones with the great, vast experience, are probably the ones that should be avoiding going back to school and teaching at this time. They should maybe do it virtually because they're at greater risk of having an infection and suffering a more likely mortality from the infection. So I think that sort of sums it up.
Yeah, it does sum it up very, very well. Yeah, very, very well. But just to pick up one thing you talked about, give us a sense about the treatment and how efficacious it is. You mentioned remdesivir. There's something called, I guess, pronation, having you on your chest. And there are various things and some cocktails you can put together. How effective are those?
They're very effective. And I'll have to tell you that I'm going to avoid mentioning hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax, but I will if you want me to. However, in the acute phase, we have seen no effect from hydroxychloroquine in patients that come into the hospital, wind up on the floor in our COVID units, and wind up in the intensive care unit. We do see where we need to thin their blood with anticoagulants because clotting is a big issue. That's number one. Number two, if the patient is undergoing something we call cytokine storm, where the immune system is attacking the lungs, attacking the heart, it's a certain death because what happens is you get acute respiratory distress syndrome, and that oven by itself from other diseases is a catastrophe. So we know how to prevent that pretty much. Remdesivir is very effective as an antiviral, and it is used at the outset, as well as the blood thinners And then if we see things getting bad, we'll use dexamethasone, which is a steroid, and possibly a drug called tocilizumab. And that's pretty complicated, but that's an anti-leukin drug. Anti-leukins or interleukins are communication molecules within the immune system, and they can either rev up or rev down the immune response.
All right, in a crisis like this, you really need an autoimmune expert, which we have here. Thank you so much to Dr. Bob Lahita of St. Joseph Healthcare System. Coming up, the plight of small businesses in this recession. We talk with Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network, about what we can do. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
What would the world be like if we listened more? At Honda, our ears are always open to new ideas. Oh, there's one now, knocking on our eardrum. What's that? What if we made a car with cameras instead of wing mirrors? A robot mower that knows when it's time to cut the grass. A self-balancing motorcycle. And what if by 2022, all of our mainstream cars were hybrid or electric? Huh. Great idea. Thanks, ears. Honda, the power of dreams.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Okay, here we go. With the NFL Draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL Show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Who says you can't have a laugh while getting serious about America's pastime? On the daily podcast Locked On MLB, comedian and baseball fanatic Paul Francis Sullivan talks about each team, each pennant race, and everything else in the game. from rule changes and controversies to baseball cards and stadium food.
For those of you who are not familiar with me or the old show, I love to obsess over baseball. I'm talking baseball over the Super Bowl. We had a TV showing the division series during my wedding.
Search Locked On MLB on TuneIn to listen today.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Shaquille O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
Times Radio, an exciting new national speech station, is here.
Featuring live news,
analysis, conversation,
and the unequivocal world-beating journalism of The Times.
Join Asma Mir and me, Stig Abel.
I'm John Pienaar. Join me on Times Radio.
Join me, Mariella Frostrup.
I'm Giles Corrin.
Hello, I'm Kathy Newman.
This is Michael Portillo.
Join me, Carol Walker.
I'm Hugo Rifkind.
Times Radio is here. Search Times Radio on TuneIn to listen.
Trey Wingo here from ESPN's Golic and Wingo. Every morning, Mike Golic Jr., and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golic and Wingo and start listening today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, they're all higher right now. Stocks at or near session highs, but do want to begin with a couple of headlines for you out of Miami-Dade. The number of COVID-19 patients there rising to a record 2,029. Previous number, 2,023. ICU patients at a record 438. Previously, 413. Miami-Dade says it has a record 226 COVID-19 patients on ventilators. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. The S&P 500 index has been swinging, though, between gains and losses, as has NASDAQ. Let's begin with the NASDAQ Composite Index, up now by 8 points. That would be a gain of 0.1%. S&P's up 17, up 0.6. Dow Jones Industrial Average up 352, up now by 1.4%. But again, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ close to session highs. 10-year up 3/32 with a yield of 0.60%. We've got gold up 0.4, 18.09 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, $40.29 a barrel. One final note: the Washington Press Club Foundation is scrapping its 2020 congressional dinner. I'm Charlie Pellet. That, David Weston, is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. From New York, this is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Small businesses have been hit particularly hard by the pandemic and the resulting economic shutdown, putting millions out of work. The question is, what is most effective at addressing the needs of small businesses? We welcome now Alfredo Ortiz. He is CEO of Jobs Creators Network. Mr. Ortiz is also a member of the board of Latinos for Trump. So, Mr. Ortiz, thank you so much for joining us. Give us a sense of the plight of small business right now. Are they on the rebound at all?
Yeah, David, this is, thank you for having me. First of all, this has been one of the most challenging times, I think, for small businesses in probably the recent history. They have been hit hard, especially with a lot of the regulations related to COVID, the opening and the closing and the opening and the closing. That is probably one of the hardest issues that they have been facing. A lot of these small businesses had been pretty excited, were ramping up, gearing up, had opened up, just to be shut down again, especially, for example, in Los Angeles, where a lot of these restaurants and indoor seating is closed down. And people have to understand how difficult it is, this opening and closing procedure for small businesses. When you ramp up and you start buying, for example, all these perishable goods, and then you have to close down, it's not like you can keep them in your freezer or your refrigerator, for example. It all gets wasted. And then they have to ramp up all again. These small businesses don't have that kind of cash flow to continue opening and closing businesses, especially these restaurants. And, I'm concerned, too, from the downtown, what I call de-urbanization, where a lot of these office buildings have gone empty because people are now working from home. So a lot of these small businesses,
no longer have these revenues coming in from, these large office buildings.
Would they be better off if the mayor or the governor, whoever's responsible for it, were to say, we're going to keep them all shut until we're sure we can keep them open?
No, you know what? That would be the true death nail for these small businesses. I think what would make sense is if they look at, the overall facts. It's literally only a handful of counties where we're experiencing, the kind of crisis that is being delivered, through the media. And I think we need to really look at this, not state by state, not even, city by city or county by county, but literally almost down to the zip codes. You take Los Angeles County, for example. That is an enormous piece of space, basically, you're talking about. And the variations just from one zip code to another can be great. And the other big thing is we have to understand, too, that it's still the most vulnerable that are still having, the greatest cases of death, unfortunately and sadly. It is, those, 75 and over, where most of the cases and deaths are still happening. And while we are seeing that increases in cases, David, is part of that really is because we are testing more. But part of that really is, of those COVID cases, they are amongst the younger population. But that younger population seems to be very, very effective right now at really fighting that virus. And the cases are shorter in length in terms of hospitalizations, and they're not as serious. A lot of them not needing ventilators, for example, which is not the case for our older population. So you really need to break down these facts. The one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. And these small businesses are suffering. And when you have 2/3 of our new job growth country, that's a big, big deal.
No question about it. It also has been disproportionately difficult on minority communities, African Americans and Latinos, as well as, frankly, Native Americans. Is there anything specific we should be doing for those communities?
Well, what I say as we break down these kinds of communities, I urge mayors, for example, to give the utmost latitude on their regulations, for example, of eating inside or outside and how much you can do that. Close off streets, for example, that are easily closed off to allow the maximum amount of space for outdoor seating, for example. And I know I'm focused a lot on restaurants, but that's because that's where most of that job loss is really happening, is in the hospitality area. I have to tell you, my heart goes out to all those hotels out there, all those hotel owners. A lot of these are immigrants, our immigrant families that have worked so hard, to buy a piece of that American dream. It's a tough challenge for those, for the hotels. But, right now, a lot of the job growth, can be had is in the restaurant and hospitality industry. So that's where I go, let's give those folks the utmost flexibility possible. And that's really done at that very, very local city council level.
Congress has been pretty open with the checkbook so far. There may be some coming on the way. And one of the initiatives was the payroll protection program that was designed to help a lot of the small businesses. Did it work?
Yes. Unmitigated success, first and foremost. And regardless of what is in the headlines, 51 million jobs were saved because of the payroll protection program. And so from that perspective, it's an unmitigated success. Were there people who may have taken advantage of the program or who, benefited from the program that maybe really shouldn't have? Absolutely. Unfortunately, we live in a world where people will do what they need to do to maximize their own gains at the expense of others. But when you look at it, that's a handful of cases relative to the millions of loans that were issued to small businesses that literally saved them. I mean, I can tell you as a matter of personal fact, I have a dozen close colleagues and friends who tell me specifically that their businesses were saved because of the Paycheck Protection Program.
What do the small businesses need from Congress now as we talk about a fourth round of stimulus?
What we need Congress to allow people to keep more of their own money, period. The payroll tax cut. It is the one thing we must do, and we must do that quickly. It is a huge opportunity not only for the employers, but for the employees as well. If you think about it, that's a 15%. That's split usually between the employer and the employee. So if you allow that to go away, at least for, let's say, the rest of the year, for the employer, that's 7.5%. For the employee, that's 7.5%. For the single contractor, the 1099, those independent contractors, David, that's 15% of their back into their pocketbook. And it is the most efficient way of doing it because guess what? The money doesn't have to go to the government and then from the government back to the person. You literally turn off the switch, and overnight you can enact 15%, for example, I talked about these independent contractors, in their pocketbooks overnight.
So finally here, I'm mindful of the fact you are on the board of Latinos for Trump. Give us the one strongest reason why a Latino should vote for President Trump.
Before COVID, we had record high medium wage income growth. We had record home ownership, and we had record low unemployment. Unfortunately, again, COVID has changed that, but we are trying to make our way back to fix that. But the low regulations and low taxes were key to making all that happen.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really good to have you with us. That is Alfredo Ortiz of Job Creators Network and also of Latinos for Trump. So that's going to do it for today's edition of Balance of Power. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Claudia. She's a care worker.
I got the call from NHS Test and Trace. Told I'd been in contact with someone with coronavirus. Couldn't believe it. I had to isolate at home for 14 days. Couldn't go to work, couldn't go to the shops, couldn't get out to exercise. I didn't even feel ill. But you know what? To protect my family, my friends, my community, well, you just do it, don't you?
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Tuesday evening by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one. Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Are you ready to play?
This summer, ITV Hub is fully loaded with loads more fall series.
Gonna get messy.
Yeah, like it's fuller than ever. From Love Island to Laia, we have divas lined up back to back.
Filmy and sister.
From the GC and the Ibiza Weekend reps to the Real Housewives, it's round full of lots and lots of...
This is getting too much now.
Laughs, tears and smiles. It's crammed full with full series like Wiz, Flesh and Blood, Harry's Heroes and Manx in Mumbai. We've grown, expanded and just gone a bit extra this summer.
Give me some more.
ITV Hub fully loaded this summer.
The best experience possible.
Did we mention it's looking fuller than ever?
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Interactive Brokers studio in New York City and live from my home in New Jersey, streaming on YouTube as well. It is Tuesday, July 14, 2020. Carol Masser along with Jason Kelly. You're in our studio back
I'm glad
at
you clarified
731
that,
Lex.
just to figure out where you were and where I was.
Well, it could have been a guessing game, but I decided not to do that.
Yeah.
But listen, no more guessing about some of the big banks because we got our first window into the second quarter as some of those big banks here in the U.S. reported results. It's safe to say, Jason, reason, they're a bit mixed.
I think that is exactly right, and it certainly seems to be the way the market is taking it. Carol, we're going to hear from the CFO of Wells Fargo. Market not happy with them, to say the least, but that's not a news story.
No, exactly, and I feel like you do have to separate them from the rest of the pack, but we're going to get into that a little bit later on. Right now, though, let's get a check on that trading day, and let's bring in Charlie Pellet.
And here's what's going on. Let's begin with the big banks. Wells Fargo is down 5.3%. Citigroup shares trading lower by 3.3%. JP Morgan Chase up after this morning's report, up now by 0.4%. Stocks trading near session highs. It's been a volatile day led by gains in energy, materials, and industrial stocks. Treasury yields fell. The dollar weakened. Right now we've got the 10-year yield 0.60%. S&P's up 18, up 0.6%. The Dow up 333, up by 1.3%. NASDAQ spending a lot of the day on the minus side, up now by 20 points, up by 0.2%. Gold up 0.4 now, $18.09 the ounce, and crude oil, West Texas Intermediate up 0.4%, $40.27 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Carol Masser at her home in New Jersey. Let's set the Business Week agenda, if we can. Right across from me at the appropriate social distance, of course, is Michael McKee, International Economics and Policy Correspondent for Bloomberg. Joining us from your great state of New Jersey is Dave Wilson, Stocks Editor, author of the Chart and Stock of the Day. Dave, I want to start with you to help us understand the contours of that trade. We just heard the numbers from Charlie. It's mixed. That seems to be the message of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of bouncing around, perhaps, is a better way to describe it, because right now I'm looking at the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500. They're all higher.
Yeah.
I mean, the financial stocks are barely higher, and the banks are certainly weighing on that performance. You know, when you figure Wells Fargo's down 5.4% and Citigroup's down 3.2%, but you know, we've really just seen some fluctuations. I mean, I've been watching, what we would call the big tech companies, from Amazon to Apple, Microsoft, Google's owner Alphabet, Facebook, Netflix, put them all together. And earlier on, they were taking a bit of a hit, and they've come back. I mean, Apple's actually higher, and the biggest loss for that group at the moment is about 1%. So it's almost like, today people saw the weakness in those shares and decided it was time to jump in.
Right.
I mean, sure, the financial companies aren't helping things any, but at least, you're seeing some resiliency. Right. With stocks here.
And I have to say, I always wonder about that resiliency in the equity markets, whether it's substantiated by what we're seeing on the economic front. Hence, enter Michael McKee, who's back in our studio. We got a reading on inflation. I heard you breaking it down this morning.
Yeah, a little bit of inflation. The month-over-month rise in the consumer price index was 0.6, which was the high for quite some time. But that was basically because gasoline prices went up 12.3% in June because of the deal between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Prices were so low. And so on a percentage basis, you had the increase. And year over year, CPI is running at 0.6%. And you compare that to what the Fed's target of 2% is, and you can see we really don't have an inflation problem. What'll be interesting is we saw gasoline prices rise a lot. We saw food prices rise about 5% on a year-over-year basis. We had the problems with the slaughterhouses and stuff like that with meat.
Right.
And those are the inputs into what people think inflation is going to be. So you may see inflation expectations rise, even if inflation doesn't.
And so what's the economic outlook in general, Mike? We talked with Yelena Shalecheva yesterday, and she was talking about the danger of this stale data, essentially, that it lags, and it certainly doesn't reflect what we're seeing minute to minute, headline by headline. This is California is shutting down again. As you talk to economists, as you make your own observations, what are you seeing out there?
And can I just throw in as the backdrop, you had the banks today saying we don't see a V recovery, and their provisions for bad loans are near 2008 levels. So we've got that as the backdrop.
Did anybody else besides me hear the theme music from Jaws when Jimmy Diamond was talking? I mean, he said, it's out there. Yeah. It's coming. And that's the general feeling of pretty much all the economists who don't work for the administration. Their view is that we're sort of entering a second wave, maybe Bank of America calls it a third wave of the economic crisis, where you open up and then one of two things happens. You have to shut down again, as we're seeing in so many states, or companies, particularly restaurants and small retailers, come back and find they don't have customers anymore. Right. And so they go through the whole process of shutting down again and going out of business permanently. And, of course, we've seen it on a big scale with a number of companies, and the bankruptcies that have been filed are setting monthly records as well. So you have this second wave of jobs that are going to be lost because either people came back on payrolls and have to leave again, or people came back and the company is gone.
Well, the other thing is, and Jason, you were talking about this a lot on our morning call, it's among the most read stories. It's one about America's jobless, about to lose their $600 a week, right? This is their extra federal unemployment benefits. You know, Mike, if that doesn't get reinstated or upped, that's going to be a big factor, right, in terms of our economic recovery.
Yeah, I suspect you'll see something like it. I don't know if it'll be 600. The Republican argument is that it keeps people on the sidelines. They don't want to go back to work because they're making more money. There's no evidence that that's the case right now, right. But maybe they lower the amount somewhat. There's been talk of restructuring it so that it becomes something of a bonus if your company calls you back and you go back to work, rather than just saying, no, I want to collect the money. But with between that and all the other things that need to be done in a stimulus bill, like bailing out states and cities, I think what you have is the old saying, nothing concentrates the mind like a hanging. And all these guys who are making these decisions are running for re-election. Yeah. And having a whole lot of unemployed people defaulting on mortgages and not paying their rents and starving children in the streets doesn't look good in a campaign ad.
It does not. That is true. And we are getting ever closer to November. Michael McKee, thank you so much. International economics and policy correspondent for Bloomberg. Dave Wilson, quick tease for the chart.
Imagine the U.S. as an emerging stock market.
Whoa. Provocative.
And quick. Thank you so much, Dave Wilson.
I like
we
it.
really appreciate when you know we're running tight on time. Dave Wilson's going to be back a little bit later on. And Mike McKee, our thanks to him as well, international economics and policy correspondent at Bloomberg News. Let's go to the Business Week Bite of the Day. Jason, it's one number that tells us a lot. Today's number is 12. Working from home became the norm for many during virus restrictions, but people aren't sure that they want it to continue in the post-pandemic world. According to YouGov's economic recovery tracker, 12 nations, including Canada, Australia, the U.S., and most of Europe, more respondents disagreed than agreed with the statement, I will work from home a lot more.
Including Jamie Dimon, I think it's fair to say. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a few minutes when we break down some of those bank earnings. Also coming up, the CFO of Wells Fargo, he's going to be live on our air later on in the show. And as I mentioned, an investor in banks, big and small, Anton Schutz, he's going to be along with us. He actually buys and sells the stocks here. And so I'm really interested in his perspective because, as we've said, Wells Fargo, a little bit of an outlier, but those banks, they do give you such an important window, especially the regional banks, candidly, Carol, in terms of how businesses are feeling.
And Jason, he's tended to like those regional names, so we'll see where he is at this point. Also, we've got one of the front runners in the pursuit of a COVID-19 vaccine. We've got the president and CEO of Inovio, Dr. Joseph Kim. He's going to be with us, along with another player in the medical community, Dr. Christopher Chen. He's the CEO of Chen Med, and he's going to join us once again, the more vulnerable populations exposed to the virus. We've also got an IPO today, and we're going to check in with the president and CEO of the fintech
Encino, indeed. And a couple of our favorite reporters along to join us via Business Week. Max Abelson on the virus and a billionaire's view, and Keith Naughton on the Ford Bronco. Let's get down to Washington now. Nancy Lyons is there for world and national headlines.
Thanks, Jason. Florida continues to be the coronavirus hotspot, with the state posting a record number of deaths in the past 24 hours, 132. The Miami area is the hardest hit. Miami Beach's Democratic Mayor Dan Gelber is resting the blame on Governor Rick DeSantis, who refuses to shut things down.
He hasn't even said you have to wear a mask, which doesn't even impact the economy. I mean, one of the problems we're having is just sort of the leadership in telling people what they have to do.
Governor DeSantis maintains the spike that his state is seeing is because of the expansion of testing. Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, has pleaded not guilty to charges that she recruited girls and women for the financier to sexually abuse more than 2 decades ago. She appeared in a video court hearing today in Manhattan. She's charged with helping Epstein groom girls as young as 14 for sex. Prosecutors say she's a flight risk, citing when agents went to pick her up, she tried to flee. She had a cell phone wrapped in foil, a misguided effort to evade tracing. Well, the White House's American Workforce Policy Advisory Board is out with a new ad campaign called Find Something New to encourage those who are unemployed to seek new opportunities.
You have more options than you think. You can do this.
You will find something.
You will find something new.
The initiative has been swiftly criticized on social media, with some suggesting the effort is insensitive during a pandemic and the widespread unemployment it has caused. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
People love a good story. They like it even better when that story is real.
Is this something strange in the numbers?
Paul Sweeney.
That seems like a big miss to me.
Bonnie Quinn.
New funds getting started in order to take advantage of what might be a moment.
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern.
If Russia does throw this spanner in the works, what does it do to relations going forward?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
How important is that statement there?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. That's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Economics.
All this doom and gloom was out there.
Finance.
Do you see this as a technical correction?
Investment.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Lots and lots of talk about what the Fed should and shouldn't do.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and the names that shape the world's markets.
Can we speak with Professor Schiller of Yale University?
Bloomberg Surveillance. Listen today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Short on time? Don't worry. You can still get your cook on with Asda. Get 3 Asda ready meals for just £5.50. Like our beef lasagna or our tomato and mozzarella panette bake. Hang up your oven gloves. We've got dinner covered. Asda. Save money. Live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Meals 400 grams, £2.10 each.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Thanks to National Lottery players, the Emerald Centre are now providing emergency food supplies and support for people in Bedfordshire like Alan.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects in England and across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, tune in as the latest guidelines from the CDC. Indoor gatherings. Wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Don't share food, toys, or other items, and avoid shared surfaces. Open windows for better ventilation. Try to avoid gathering indoors as much as possible. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Stay close to college hoops conversation with the College Basketball Talk podcast from NBC Sports. Join Rob Doster and Bobby Reagan for weekly recaps of what's happening in every conference, nostalgic flashbacks to classic games, and big picture discussions on the future of the sport.
Yes, they found a way to ensure that there was a financial incentive for be able to get paid for K to go there, if that makes sense. But it's not, there was still a recruitment involved, right? Let me think about it like this.
Search College Basketball Talk on TuneIn to listen.
Times Radio, an exciting new national speech station, is here.
Featuring live news,
analysis, conversation,
and the unequivocal world-beating journalism of The Times.
Join Asma Mir and me, Stig Abel.
I'm John Pienaar. Join me on Times Radio.
Join me, Mariella Frostrup.
I'm Giles Corrin.
Hello, I'm Kathy Newman.
This is Michael Portillo.
Join me, Carol Walker.
I'm Hugo Rifkind.
Times Radio is here. Search Times Radio on TuneIn to listen.
This is Mike Golick from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Trey Wingo, my son, and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
You know, while we're playing these ads, you could open Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and follow @TuneIn to learn about the best stuff to listen to around the app. Or you could just sit there and listen to these ads. Get social.
Get social.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are higher. Right now we have got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ holding at or near session highs. It's been a volatile day. Gains are being led in the energy, materials, and industrial sectors. Right now, the 10-year, the yield there, 0.60%, up 4/30 seconds. S&P up 22, higher by 0.7%. The Dow is advancing 378 points, up 1.5%. NASDAQ's up 26. That is a gain of about 0.3%. Gold up 0.4%, 18.10 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.4% right now, 40.26 a barrel. Nomura Holdings is closing its Instinet equity research division in the U.S. as the investment bank pulls back from the business of providing its own market intelligence to clients. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason, earnings season kicking off with a big batch of earnings. And I feel like the one headline, and we talked about it a little bit with Mike, JP Morgan, Citi, and Wells setting aside almost $28 billion for bad loans in the second quarter. And that's a mark only surpassed by the last 3 months of 2008 during the depths of the financial crisis.
Yeah, and I think that's notable. You know, we are careful about making comparisons from crisis to crisis, but those are the sorts of things that do have an apples-to-apples comparison to some extent, because ultimately that gives us a window into the underlying economic crisis, which is really important. Let's check in with Anton Schutz, President Chief Investment Officer of Menden Capital Advisors, joining us on the phone. Anton, a very busy day, to say the least. What's the most important thing from your perspective? Is it the bad loan provisions? Is it something else that you heard from the big banks?
Well, so first of all, and I hate to do this, but I have to go back to your comment about the loan provisions and going back to the crisis. And, you know, the banks had to adopt in the first quarter a brand new accounting treatment called CECL, which is a horrible treatment because it's pro-cyclical, right? It makes the banks reserve a lot more when things become uncertain than they would have under any old accounting standard. So when we first got those big charges in April, everybody goes, oh, my gosh. And here we go again. And they all have to subscribe to a bunch of factors. but it's the loss over the life of the loan, which is very different than under the old methodology where you go, look, what kind of losses can I see coming anywhere in the near term? I've got to set aside reserves. Now, if you make a 10-year loan, you got to go, well, how much money can I lose over the next 10 years on this one loan? And it's a much, much bigger number. So believe it or not, the banks are much better reserved than they have been. And their capital ratios are obviously much stronger. So,
right. So it's not about, but I guess the question then, Anton, just to take that a level deeper is the banks definitely, I think it's undeniable that the banks are healthier than they were in the financial crisis. I don't think anybody's debating that or should debate that candidly. I guess the question is, are we overdoing it by saying that there is a certain level of pain and suffering out there, so that what you're arguing is that the number may not be as dire, or the underlying reality may not be as dire?
Sure, it's not apples to apples to prior.
Got it.
Anything
fair, good
prior to the first quarter. So that's really important. And quite frankly, I believe that.
Hey, Oracle. Yes, we do have to play AdWords because they are our sponsors. So basically, people, or you can have a look at the company who sponsored our broadcast channel. This is like TV, but it's on YouTube. So this is basically another way the company can advertise on our channel. All right?
Some amazing loss absorbing earnings power at these companies. So that's the good news. And I would say there are pieces of good news out there, right? The guys who have the capital markets, I mean, they rocked it. JP Morgan, amazing quarter. Citibank, incredibly strong quarter. Wells Fargo doesn't have that business of the same size, so doesn't have that as an offset. Mortgage, incredibly strong quarter out there. And so far, credit has behaved. Now, it's behaved for a lot of reasons. Right? All these great government programs, as well as forbearance. And we've seen it across a number of different things. We've seen it across consumer and credit card and auto, and we've seen it in commercial. And really what that forbearance means is, okay, borrower, we're going to give you some more time. We're going to add the principal interest to the end of the loan period. We'll talk about it when you're ready to start paying. Now, at least on the consumer side, probably about half the consumers have been making payments, so that's the good news. I think that's very good news. We've seen a number of people requesting forbearance in mortgage. This is before today. It's just Fannie and Freddie start to drop. People are saying, hey, no, it's okay. I've got it. I can do this. So there are some green shoots out here. What obviously is the shoot that's scaring everybody is the reemergence of this terrible disease.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to figure out, right? Anton, the longer this goes on, I mean, I know for JP Morgan, I guess their net charge-offs, if I can get it out, which are their overdue loans, the bank doesn't expect to get back. They were up 6% from the first 3 months of the year. It was less than what was predicted. I guess we're all just trying to, in a world where there's not a lot of visibility, kind of figure out what this recovery looks like on the other side. And I just, it just feels like, there's been a lot of enthusiasm in the equity markets overall, and just trying to glean from these banks whether or not things are going to be okay. I mean, ultimately, long term, they will be. But I think we're trying to get an idea of what this next 6 to 12 to 18 months look like.
Right. And that long-term phrase is so important. And I think, obviously, the banks and the government, and the banks are a great conduit for moving money to people who need it. Obviously, forbearance has been important. I do think we get more programs coming from the government depending on how long this lasts. Do we need another round of this PPP? And I don't mean, look, there's capacity in the system for first-time users. They haven't used all of it. But what about everybody who has used it?
Right.
You're a restaurant, you've borrowed it, you've paid your people, they've knocked out unemployment, and now you're shutting back down again. So I think there's some talk in Washington about a second round of this coming. And I think that's great for the borrower, great for employment, and good for the banking system. The banking system has actually generated a tremendous amount of fees. The big banks are donating the fees to charity.
So, Anton, hold that thought. We're going to continue this conversation in just a few minutes. Got to do some news here. Check on all those headlines that are coming across on a very busy Tuesday. That's Anton Schutz. He's going to be back with us, President, Chief Investment Officer at Minden Capital Advisors. Carol, a lot to talk about when it comes to the big banks. They're right in the middle of this crisis. That's for sure.
I want to see what are some of his favorite names, too.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Moderna is getting set to begin the final trial of its coronavirus vaccine. The company next week will begin enrolling 30,000 adults at high risk of contracting COVID-19. The trial will begin July 27th. Moderna is up 4%. Stocks are modestly higher, led by the Dow, but the Nasdaq is struggling to advance after setting several all-time highs this month. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 379, the S&P is up 22, the Nasdaq up 26. Bed Bath & Beyond is up 9% as its turnaround efforts begin to bear fruit. The retailer reportedly said it was cash flow positive in June, and it expects to generate up to $450 million from selling unspecified non-core assets. Retail inflation flared up in June. The government says consumer prices jumped 0.6%. The 12.3% surge in gasoline was mainly responsible. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
The best of Bloomberg Business Week every business day.
We've got a market sell-off that's spreading around the globe.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day, Carol.
The day's breaking global business, finance, and tech news, along with smart analysis.
We know the Fed is going to be sure and steady.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast.
A great scoop on the terminal.
Listen today on BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
As we open things up again, how do we keep safe? Max runs a cafe.
We've worked really hard to make the coffee shop COVID safe. Keep 2 meters apart, or 1 meter with extra precautions. Follow our new one-way system. Use the extra hand sanitizer, and try to stay at your table as much as possible. We can't wait to welcome everyone back. But please, remember the safety guidelines so we can all stay open.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
You know, while we're playing these ads, you could open Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and follow @TuneIn to learn about the best stuff to listen to around the app. Or you could just sit there and listen to these ads.
Get social.
Get social. Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB? On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Braden and Jared Carabas cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
Trey Wingo here from ESPN's Golic and Wingo. Every morning, Mike Golic Jr., and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golic and Wingo and start listening today.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Outdoor activities, wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Avoid shared surfaces like swings or benches. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn. It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1968, Hank Aaron hits his 500th home run off of a San Francisco Giant, Mike McCormick.
After the All-Star game, Henry Aaron steals the headlines when he hits his 500th home run of his career. It comes against the Giants.
Hammerin' Hank Aaron collected his 500th home run off Mike McCormick on July 4th.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with Anton Schutz talking about big banks. Carol?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get to that in just a moment. Let's get back to your top business story as another check on the trading day. Here is once again Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. We got big gains on Wall Street with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. They're all advancing right now. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all higher. Volatile trading. Let's get right to the numbers with the S&P up 26, up 0.8%. The Dow up 424 now. That's a gain of 1.6%. NASDAQ up 43, higher by 0.4%. Stocks are advancing, and the gains are being led by energy, materials, and industrial stocks. Right now, the 10-year yield 0.61%, up 2/32. Gold up 7.50 the ounce. COMEX gold up 0.4%, 18.10 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.4%, $40.25 a barrel. Bank shares, they are trading mixed right now. We'll have more on bank stocks for you coming up in a moment, but J.P. Morgan Chase shares are up 0.4% after earnings this morning. Citigroup is down 3.5%. Wells Fargo shares now lower by 5.3%. So what about putting money to work in the banking sector? Gerard Cassidy covers the banking industry for RBC Capital Markets.
We really don't know for certain how this economy is going to evolve over the next 6 to 12 months. And if an investor is in the camp that they think that the unemployment numbers are going to remain stubbornly high, that the real GDP numbers actually don't recover as much as people hope by the end of the year, then bank stocks may not be the place to be.
Sources say Boston Scientific is exploring a sale of its specialty pharmaceutical business that's focused on treatments for snake venom. Could fetch close to $1 billion. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Interesting times, Charlie Pellet. All right, thank you so much. Let's get back to our conversation about the big banks. The earnings season, of course, underway. Anton Schutz is with us, President and Chief Investment Officer at Menden Capital Advisors. Roughly $190 million in assets under management, on the phone from Florida. So, Anton, what's this year been like for you?
Well, you know, I'll tell you, the storm we've seen in the stock prices has been spectacular. And I think, as we talked about earlier, that uncertainty is what's really caused it, not actual losses. Obviously, we've seen the yield curve change dramatically. The Fed's lowered rates a lot, so that's hurt margin. Uncertainty, creates lower loan growth. And then, of course, we've spent a lot of time talking about, potential losses out there. And unfortunately, nobody knows all those answers. So it's led to a bunch of my stocks being a lot cheaper than they were. And, I think some of it is deserved, but much of it is not. And I think that some banks have really done a great job underwriting and will come through this incredibly well. And I don't think we're going to have a lot of failures this round unless things get a lot worse. And I think we've done a great job about, making stuff not a lot worse. I think the distancing, the face masks, and I know we've got a resurgence, but, I think people want to get back to work. Businesses want to function. We're all adapting to work from home. And I think the economy's not going back to where it was a couple of months ago. Its question is it going to go back to where it was, in January or December?
And so, Anton, I know we know you look at regional banks very closely as well. What's the read from some of those CEOs as you look at the numbers coming out from them, on a monthly, daily, weekly basis? What's the read you get on the economy and their health?
Sure. Really good question. Obviously, if you're in a spot that's got sort of a whammy of energy prices as well as what's going on here, a lot more uncertainty in some of the places that have energy. And when you start going into the rest of the industry, you start talking about underwriting and really, picking apart parts of the banking industry that are subject to this, right? If it's retail, that means, strip plazas for the smaller banks. If it's restaurants, generally means takeout, not full service. So, I think there's good news there. The strip plazas, do they have supermarkets in them? Do they have a CVS or a Rite Aid or something that is going to be an anchor and a good anchor, and that credit's going to be okay? If it's a hotel, is it going to be a Marriott Courtyard by the Thruway, which people are using? People back in their cars, they're driving. Or is it a hotel by convention center where no one's going to be using that anytime soon? And those tend to be bigger loans, and they're at the bigger banks or insurance companies. But really pressing the banks for underwriting standards and loan to values. And, if you've underwritten these things at, 50 or 60% loan to value, the bank losing money on this is relatively low. It could become non-performing. It could need help. But the bank actually losing money, becomes a very low probability event. And obviously some banks have been more aggressive and underwritten at higher standards.
As you said, though, before, Anton, some of your investments, have certainly, they're a lot cheaper than they were, before this, and I get that. So what have you had to do to kind of manage your portfolio? Have you gotten out of some names because you just can't deal with the exposure at this point? Have you upped your positions in others? I'm just curious if you get into the specifics of some of maybe what you've been selling, what you've been buying.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. Certainly during the depths of the sell-off, I don't know, March 23rd was the bottom or where it was, you had a chance to upgrade in some cases. You could sell a small micro cap in an energy state and turn around and, buy, Citi or JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley. And I think that in some cases, we've gotten more liquid and we've upgraded to larger names with similar, pricing. We've added names like a Synovus, which is a big regional bank, or First Horizon, which is a self-help story. They're in the middle of a big merger and a lot of cost cuts coming there. So you upgrade, the quality, you upgrade the liquidity. Those are the kind of moves that we're making. Certainly any of the names that were big positions for me before are still big positions for me today, percentage-wise. None of them have, caused me to go, oh my gosh, they've done something bad. Management is key to doing well in any one of the, in a tough environment as well as a good environment. So, underwriting loans the proper way, like I mentioned before, 50% loan to value is going to do a lot better than someone who's lending at 80% loan to value. The risk is very different. And,
right.
When I interview banks, those are kind of conversations I'm having on these day-to-day, Zoom calls. I'll tell you, you get overrun with Zoom conferences. It's great. You can work from home, but boy, you're getting offered meeting after meeting after meeting. And, it's both funny and exhausting.
It is. Yeah, it's a different world, a different way of life, that's for sure. Anton Schutz, thank you for spending some time with us. Yeah. Really appreciate it. We know it's a busy day and a busy time, just as you described. President and Chief Investment Officer of Menden Capital Advisors joining us on the phone from Florida. Carol.
And he echoes so much of what we've heard from so many people, like, what happens with the economy? Do we go back to where we were? He doesn't think we go back to where we were a few months ago, but do we go back to maybe what we saw in January and February? Yeah. When there is some clarity and much more transparency, and that would certainly change the outlook for so many different companies.
Let's get down to D.C. Nancy Lyons is there with some headlines. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Jason, Joe Biden wants to spend $2 trillion galvanizing a clean energy economy. He's hopeful it would spur millions of union jobs, building the wind turbines, sustainable homes, and electric vehicles needed to rapidly throttle U.S. greenhouse gas emissions that are driving climate change.
Transforming the American electrical sector to produce power without producing carbon pollution and electrifying an increased share of our economy will be the greatest spurring of job creation and economic competitiveness in the 21st century. That's why we're going to achieve a carbon pollution-free electric sector by the year 2035.
Biden's plan seeks to balance the desires of progressive Democrats who are demanding bold action to confront climate change, while also protecting swing state manufacturing jobs. President Trump is slumping in the polls against Biden and struggling with the pandemic, an economic downturn, and nationwide protests about racial justice. Bloomberg's Josh Wingrove says the president is in a woe-is-me mindset.
All presidents get dealt bad hands. It's a case of what they do with it. And the president has really increasingly sort of bent the narrative around himself. He's complained that the FBI has mistreated him. He's complained that the IRS has mistreated him. That's, of course, in relation to him declining to release his tax records. Certainly the media are at the top of his list for being mistreated. Even Fox News, which he watches pretty regularly, he thinks is not sufficiently fair to him.
Most of Trump's predecessors, when faced with crises, kept their emotions in check. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seizechange.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outsea in 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Mark Baribeau, the head of Global Equity at Jennison Associates.
You're looking at bigger implications of technology playing a role in keeping us all connected, giving us access to information or goods very quickly. So we don't see any of those trends changing. In fact, they're likely to accelerate. There's some new things that have come along, though, that people might find useful, like telemedicine. There were skeptics about that, and I think the more people using it, especially the more doctors are using it today, the more they're liking it. You can see more patients. It can be more effective. It might actually be a better solution.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's PGIM.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
COVID-19. On days when it's...
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Tuesday evening by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview floor. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without? With? Without? With? Without? Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors? The new Honda E with wing cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Now then, Big Mac or Chicken McNuggets? Did you know you can order ahead contact-free by downloading the My McDonald's app? Simply select some of your favourites from our reduced menu and we'll start preparing them when you're nearby. Nice. From 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Participating restaurants only. App T's and C's apply.
Okay, here we go. With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL Show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more. Where do hockey and pop culture coexist?
So let me get this straight. You would be able to name more people nostalgically than currently? This doesn't...
Come on.
It's crazy. I know.
Other podcast, Puck Soup NHL analyst Greg Wyshynski, Sean McAdoo, and Ryan Lambert chase the conversational biscuit up and down the ice, skating between serious discussion on what's happening in pro hockey to irreverent opinions on movies, fast food, and life in general. Search Puck Soup on TuneIn to listen.
This is Mike Golick Jr. from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Wingo, Dad, and I sit down and discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks holding near session highs. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing on this Tuesday. A 400-point jump right now for the Dow, up 1.5%. The S&P is up 22, up 0.7. NASDAQ is up 23. That is a gain of 0.2%. We are seeing gains in the energy, materials, and industrial sectors. 10-year yield 0.61%. Gold up 0.3%, holding above $1,800, $18.08 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.3%, $40.21 a barrel. After earnings, J.P. Morgan Chase up 0.5. Citigroup down 3.3%. Wells Fargo down 4.9%. Goldman Sachs tomorrow. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, this is one of my favorite stories that is in the upcoming issue of Business Week. It's online and on the Bloomberg terminal already. And I have to say, Carol, I'm not alone. People are reading this story like crazy. I think it's people of a certain age, and I put myself in that category, in their 40s. I love the Ford Bronco.
Well, I have to say, my brother's rehearsal dinner for his wedding, and we were all glued to the TV set because of OJ and the white Bronco. We were all watching, and I think it became part of our
did not know where that was
cultural history, whether you like it or not.
Rehearsal dinner.
No, for his wedding. It's just, it's kind of, we all remember kind of that chase in the white Bronco.
We do indeed.
And it sounds like the Ford Bronco, is getting a revival. Keith Naughton has this story. He's Bloomberg News auto reporter. He's joining us on the phone from Detroit. Also with us is Bloomberg Business Week editor Joel Weber on the phone from Massachusetts. Joel, don't you know where you were when that white Bronco was on the TV?
Yeah, definitely. And this story, Keith's story, the amazing part is that it actually has relatively little to do with that Bronco moment, which obviously
they don't want to remember
with for the last 20-something years, right? And what Keith uncovered in this story is that within Ford, there was this little group of sort of obsessed diehards who were always bummed that the Bronco had gone away. And so for years, they've actually been quietly toiling and basically, fighting upper management for a shot to bring back the Bronco, which, lo and behold, happened to present itself. And on that note, I'll ask Keith, Keith, as you sort of did this story, I'm just really curious, like, what was it about the Bronco that these guys were so obsessed about?
They felt it was a true and pure SUV, and that the way SUVs were evolving, they were sort of morphing into these kind of, they call them crossovers, a cross between sedans and SUVs that are curvy and comfy and not rugged at all. And they saw Jeep over there stealing all the thunder with its Jeep Wrangler, that true off-road vehicle, and they thought, we have this legendary brand that began in the 60s, obviously became infamous in the 90s with OJ, but began in the 60s. And if you go back to that original cool Bronco, they're selling for hundreds of thousands as vintage cars. Why aren't we capitalizing on this?
And so why was it such a hard sell to management, Keith?
Well, for years, they just kept hitting roadblocks. They had one going in the early 2000s. And the CEO at the time, Jack Nasser, loved it, but then that got killed because Ford got embroiled in that Firestone rollover recall scandal. I don't know if you remember that, but there were congressional investigations and hundreds of people died, and so Ford was losing billions, and they had to start cutting, and they cut the Bronco. It came back again about a decade later, and again, the recession bore down on them. Gas prices shot up. SUVs fell out of favor, and that program got killed. So they just kept trying, and they would do this group. They called themselves the Bronco Underground, and it's this group of middle managers, and they would do it literally in their spare time, lunch hours, after work, weekends. They would be sketching drawings, coming up with business plans. At one point, they convinced a plant that Ford has in South Africa to maybe produce it and ship it back to the United States. So they're begging for factory space. All of these things.
And that's actually, Keith, that's a great way to say, what was the actual breakthrough right now that allowed them to bring it back?
Yeah, so finally, then in the middle of this decade, they brought back their Ranger pickup, which gives the mechanical foundation for what a Bronco can be built on. And those pickups were increasing in popularity. Gas prices plunged. SUVs increased in popularity. Suddenly, they had an opening. They took it. They designed it. They're sharing the same factory as the Ranger pickup here in Detroit, and it was revealed yesterday, and it's getting an awful lot of attention.
Well, do consumers? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joel.
Oh, I just, the cast of characters around this, I think, is also worth taking a moment to talk about. One of which happens to be Chris Farley's cousin. What role does he play in this?
Yeah, so Ford's chief operating officer now is Jim Farley, Chris's cousin, and Jim used to work for Toyota, and in 1994, he was a junior executive for Toyota living in L.A., and he was driving home from work one day on the 405, and the police near LAX told him he needed to pull over. Everybody needed to pull over because OJ was coming through in the white Bronco. So Jim Farley, Ford's COO, stood by the side of the road and eyewitnessed the slow-speed chase as it went by. He said he had no idea really what was going on at the time. It took him to get home and turn on the news to realize exactly what he'd seen.
That is just nuts, right? Like, it's just so great. It's like coming full circle in many ways.
Well, you want to bring it full circle, Carol? Let me just leave you with this little gem, which was, so Ford announces that they're going to bring the Bronco back, and then they have to postpone it again because that announcement was OJ's birthday. So it got delayed again. They had to push it back a couple extra days.
Keith, this story just seems to keep on giving. But, I think what we're all sort of gravitating toward, though, is this is a really popular car. I mean, this could be a breakaway hit in many ways.
It could, and, the early attention to it suggests that it may. And if so, Ford could really use it because they've been struggling through 3 years of declining profits and losses. So if they could make this thing a hit, and they're doing it with this kind of retro design, you get a 2-door, 4-door, the smaller version called the Sport. It could sell. The Bronco itself, the 2- and 4-door, could sell 75,000, and the small one could sell another 75,000. The analysts tell us. So that would be a big hit.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you both so much. Keith Naughton, auto reporter for Bloomberg. Big story on the Bronco. It is back. Check it out. It's one of the most read on the Bloomberg and on Bloomberg.com. It'll be in the upcoming edition of Bloomberg Business Week. Our thanks as well to Joel Weber, editor of Bloomberg Business Week. We're going to check in with him a bit later because another great story. You get a double shot of Joel because Max Abelson, he's got a terrific piece, a very different view, a rarefied air view, Carol, shall we say, of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's, Max at his best because it just really tells a different tale of the virus. So we'll get into that. We're not going to tell you too much more, but you do want to stick around. It's a must read. I put it out on Twitter earlier this morning. And check out that story in the Ford Bronco. We'll put that one out as well. Now, for those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco and watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week will continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 1061 in Boston, Bay State Business is coming up next. Coming up next, you might recall just last week we talked about a story with Bloomberg Business Week economics editor Peter Coy about these superstar cities that aren't all that they're cracked up to be. It was all based on a study by MIT, one professor, one economist. We're going to have that professor and economist right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
It's about cities and inequality and the way back and how the way back is not easy. So all that coming up ahead here on Bloomberg Business Week. Stick with us. It's Bloomberg.
Everything seems to be in motion.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where a rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworthy in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll talk with the creator of HBO's I May Destroy You about how she turned an experience of assault into a comic drama.
I go round and round in circles, feeling comfort and then feeling like I'm in a state of shock at the fact that I'm sharing this story. And then I laugh about it because it's absurd.
Michaela Cole on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
Staying current on college hoops starts here. On the Eye on College Basketball podcast, CBS Sports columnists Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander bring you commentary, insider information, and statistical analysis covering the entire NCAA.
The amount of earning potential you could have had there, or if you had gone to play at any other place with a chance to play in the NCAA tournament, win a national championship, none of us would have faulted Cunningham for doing that, but he decided this is where he wants to be in the face of a postseason.
Search Eye on College Basketball on TuneIn to listen. To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Outdoor activities, Wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Avoid shared surfaces like swings or benches. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Tuesday, July 14th. Stocks at or near session highs. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. Has been a volatile day. We're seeing gains in energy, materials, and industrial stocks. Treasury yields fell. The dollar weakened. Right now, the 10-year yield, 0.61%, up 2/30 seconds. S&P's up 26. That is a gain of 0.8%. The Dow now surging 450 points, up 1.7%. NASDAQ is up 29 for the NASDAQ Composite Index. That is a gain right now of about 0.3%. Industry data suggests small business optimism is improving as Americans adapt to life in a pandemic. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
The National Federation of Independent Business reports small business optimism rose last month by the most since December 2016. Sales expectations led the advance, posting a record gain. A resurgence in COVID-19 cases threatens to temper business and consumer sentiment, and earnings trends are running at a decade low. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Mega cap technology shares are trading mixed. Among the so-called FANG names, Facebook is down 0.4%. Amazon is down 2%. Apple up 1.2%. Shares of Netflix are down 1.3%. And Alphabet, parent of Google, lower now by about 0.3%. Bank earnings, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo set aside almost $28 billion for bad loans in the second quarter, a mark only surpassed by the last 3 months of 2008 during the depths of the financial crisis. J.P. Morgan Chase shares, they're up today, up by 0.6%. Citigroup on the minus side, tumbling 3.5%. Wells Fargo lower now by 4.9%. Tomorrow morning, we will be hearing from Goldman Sachs. Delta Airlines says the resurgence of new coronavirus cases and related travel restrictions have stalled a fledgling recovery in U.S. travel demand. Delta shares lower now by 2.3%. Recapping, stocks higher. S&P up 26, up 0.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
So last week, Jason and I talked with Bloomberg Business Week economics editor Peter Coy. He had this great story talking about superstar cities and how they're not cracked up to, or they're not all cracked up with their, let's try that again. Superstar cities
all they're cracked up to be?
All they're cracked up to be. Yeah, there's something in my brain. The synapses not working. And this is especially the case, this is troublesome, for black male college graduates. It's all based on a new study that's out from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. We're talking about MIT. So in today's Business Week Economics, we caught up with the author of that MIT study. It's entitled The Faltering Escalator of Urban Opportunity. MIT economist and economics professor David Autor joins us on the phone from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to talk about his findings. Professor Autor, it's so nice to have you here on Bloomberg Business Week. Tell us about what you looked into and the biggest findings for you, the takeaways.
Sure. Thanks very much for having me. I'll just mention that I'm also the co-chair of the MIT Work of the Future Task Force that sort of focused on questions about employment and opportunity going forward. And the main finding of this study is that labor markets in dense cities, think New York, Los Angeles, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, have seen a real hollowing out of the set of jobs. On the one hand, a growth in professional and technical managerial work. On the other hand, a lot of growth of services, food service, cleaning, security, entertainment, recreation, home health care, transportation, maintenance, and so on. And a kind of hollowing out of middle skill, office, clerical, administrative, and also a lot of light production work that used to happen in cities. And this has kind of caused people who were at the middle, people without four-year college degrees, to kind of be pushed downward out of that middle stratum into services that are these hands-on services that are typically less well paid and have less room for upward mobility. And that's a big change from, let's say, around 1980, when cities actually offered more skilled work to people without college degrees. You would find much more specialized jobs for the less educated, and I mean include people who even have a 2-year college degree, so moderately educated folks. This urban opportunity escalator has kind of flattened out. It's kind of stalled, and this has had a larger effect on minority workers, blacks and Hispanics, than on whites. Even though it's true for all people with less than a 4-year degree, it's even more pronounced as kind of hollowing out the middle and this relative decline in wages relative to non-urban areas. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I just wanted to ask you, because it's so interesting to synthesize this, David, with, this sort of renaissance that we saw, and I'm talking pre-pandemic here, for big cities, sort of people coming back to the cities and, maybe eschewing the suburbs in some ways. Are those connected, or are they just adjacent?
They are connected, and it has been a renaissance for cities, but it's been a renaissance for cities for the highly educated.
Right.
If you're doing finance, if you're doing marketing, advertising, insurance, certain types of engineering, design, and creative work, even technology work, those things are booming. And people who do that work earn a lot more in cities, even net of the rising cost of housing in those places. But ironically, as that's occurred, the middle stratum of jobs has just faded away. And so for those who are not doing that elite work, things are getting less good. The opportunities are less favorable. Wages have not kept up with the rising cost of housing. And things have actually relatively improved outside of urban areas. And this may come as a surprise to your listeners. It's actually somewhat of a surprise to me as well. I kind of discovered this in the course of studying data. But it turns out people have, rank and file individuals have figured this out. If you look at the mobility data, you'll see that highly educated adults are moving to affluent, expensive cities, and those without college degrees are moving away. So people are kind of voting with their feet. They had already discovered that the allure of cities had basically faded for people who didn't do highly paid, highly specialized work.
What are the longer-term economic implications of this?
Well, I think the implications are that, we have moved into a very kind of bimodal economy of where automation and globalization have kind of taken out a large swath in the middle. And this, what my work has kind of uncovered, and this, again, is surprising to me as well, is this is really concentrated in urban areas. Urban areas were distinctive in that they had this thick core of middle-skill jobs in offices and factories and so on. And so as those have disappeared, they've disappeared in cities. That's where they were. Unfortunately, many, cities are, blacks and Hispanics in America are overrepresented in cities. And so it means the labor markets in which they are, most invested are the ones where opportunities are less and less favorable. What it means, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, but there's a positive side to the story, which is it's not that everything is getting worse and it's getting worser in cities, so to speak. Outside of dense urban areas, things have moved the other direction. Workers without college degrees have kind of moved up the occupational ladder and up the wage ladder. So part of the reason that dense urban areas look particularly unattractive is because the less dense, the non-urban areas look a little better. So I think, in the long run, it suggests that there's going to be probably more opportunity outside of these traditional places. That's where there's growing demand for care work. That's where more of the elderly are located and have, intensive demand for services. And so it suggests that, the kind of conventional wisdom of, go to the city, get on the escalator, that's your way up the ladder, that remains true for the highly specialized workers, and for others, the opposite is true.
Right. All right. We're going to unfortunately have to leave it there. I have so many more questions. You're going to have to come back at some point. David Otter is professor of economics at MIT, joining us on the phone from Cambridge. Also, importantly, part of an initiative around effectiveness and inequality. This is the core issue of our time, I think, Carol, that has been brought into sharp relief by everything that's gone on, all the debates around social justice and racial inequality. A really, really important topic.
Well, you do wonder, about the, how this increases some of the gaps and how it creates, homogenous society perhaps than in cities, right? Which is, we've all looked to cities as being so diverse, and maybe they're not as diverse as we've, led them to, or we've been led to believe.
And they've become less so. I think that's what's so fascinating about this. And you do wonder what role the pandemic has had in accelerating some of these trends or maybe decelerating them. We'll see. All right, let's get down to Washington. Nancy Lyons is there. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Jason, Joe Biden has a plan to set a 100% clean electricity standard by 2035. He envisions creating millions of union jobs to build the wind turbines, sustainable buildings, and electric vehicles by investing $2 trillion over 4 years on renewable energy infrastructure.
These investments are a win-win-win for this country, creating jobs, cutting energy costs, protecting our climate.
The Trump campaign has slammed the Biden plan, saying it would devastate American families and businesses. Well, the U.S. government has carried out the first federal execution in nearly 20 years. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports.
The government put to death a man who killed an Arkansas family back in the 90s as part of a white supremacist plot. 47-year-old Daniel Lewis Lee died by lethal injection at the federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. A district court in Washington, D.C. put the execution on hold hours before it was to be carried out. The Supreme Court overturned that hold in a late-night order. The family of the victims also opposed putting Lee to death, arguing he deserved a sentence of life in prison. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Former U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions and former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville are facing off today in Alabama's Republican primary runoff for Sessions' former Senate seat. Sessions safely held the seat for 20 years before resigning to lead President Trump's Justice Department. Sessions later was forced to resign after drawing Trump's ire when he withdrew from the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Trump has endorsed Tuberville. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
Business and finance have always held surprises, but this is brand new.
The move risks fueling more demonstrations, and Stokes' concern that essential freedoms will be curbed.
Karen Muskow and Nathan Hager.
Chinese lawmakers approved national security legislation.
Expert navigation through uncharted territory.
Tell us the range of outcomes that we could see on that front.
Bloomberg Daybreak, weekday mornings at 5 Eastern. On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
The market's in focus every business day. The Bloomberg Markets Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
Market sell-off glowing global once again.
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
What's the thought on Apple here?
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
There's very, very disturbing dynamics at work.
Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn. Subscribe today at BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or iTunes.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba,
please be done.
Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at NHTSA.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg term.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Tuesday evening by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now, the My Honda Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Honda Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power of dreams.
First, we're told that masks don't work. Then, we're told to wear them all the time. One week, we hear that the mortality rate is 2%. The next, well, who knows? In the time of COVID-19, there is so much uncertainty, and so much scientists are learning in real time, along with the rest of the world. So it's hard to know what you can be sure of and what's still a big question mark. Enter Podcast 19 from 538, where we'll explore the evidence behind the science in our fight against coronavirus. I'm science journalist Anna Rothschild. Each week, I'll investigate coronavirus mysteries, keep track of the latest developments on vaccines and treatments. Oh, and I'll try to edit out all the times I shush my family since I'm recording this thing from the chaos of my home.
Search Podcast 19 to listen today.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Ghislaine Maxwell has been denied bail in that sex trafficking case. Also, this headline from the Bloomberg Professional Service, the Trump administration is rescinding a rule barring foreign students from taking all classes online this fall. Two developing stories. We'll have more coming up, but right now, let's head right over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. U.S. stocks are trading mixed right now, with tech underperforming. Dow's currently up 372 points. S&P's gained 14. NASDAQ is lower by 31. The U.S. 10-year yield at 0.61%. Gold trading higher by 6. WTI crude futures are little changed, and transports gain 126 points. Leaders to the upside in the Dow, Caterpillar and Travelers. Only Pfizer and Microsoft, as well as Intel, fell. After earnings, Wells Fargo fell as much as 8%. Citigroup dropped 3%, and J.P. Morgan was little changed. In other news, Moderna said their phase 3 COVID-19 vaccine trial will begin on July 27th. And Boeing recorded 60 cancellations for their 737 MAX in June. Wrapping things up on the IPO front, Encino opened at 71. That IPO was priced at 31. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill, and to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type Squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, we've been talking a lot about banking. Let's talk about banking and IPOs. A big debut today for Encino. Pierre Naudet is the chief executive officer of that company, joins us on the phone from Wilmington, North Carolina. And Pierre, congratulations, it feels like are in order. Your stock is soaring today. Tell us a little bit about what Encino does.
Yes, thank you very much. Obviously, very exciting day for us. I'm so happy for the employees and our early investors. Well, Encino is focused on, it's a cloud-based SaaS platform that enables banks of all sizes and credit unions with more than a $10 billion opportunity for us to digitally transform onboarding, loans, and account opening. Three very simple things, but massive overhead in these banks to do it in a compliant fashion. And so we focus on those three. We build a single platform on a cloud-based platform, and we see tremendous uptake.
Right. And so you're working with Santander, TD Bank, a lot of those financial firms that are certainly very familiar to our audience. I got to ask you, though, about the IPO just quickly. You came in at 31. As Jason said, the stock is taking up. You're at 52 and change. Do you feel like the bankers priced this wrong? Because initially the expected price was like 28 to 29. Do you feel like, I mean, it certainly came above that, but do you feel like there was a bunch of money left on the table here?
Yeah, today obviously is an interesting experience. My view is that we're satisfied with what we've done. We are focused on the long term for this company. The IPO was an important milestone for us because of our international expansion and our significant investment in R&D, and this was the right time. And I'm pleased that from tomorrow morning on, I can go back to focus on my customers and my people and the special culture we've built here to actually drive this transformation in banks. Because as you can imagine, 8 years ago, nobody did banking in the cloud. And today, we are the worldwide leader in doing this and helping banks to transform and optimize.
Well, what are some of the growth rates that you're seeing, right? Because this is a big pop, and you certainly want to hold on to it, right? You don't want to see it kind of whittle away. So talk to us about the growth rates that you're seeing in your business on the top and bottom line, and also talk to us about what you're going to do with this capital raise. Yes,
so we plan to be a world-class SaaS growth company for the foreseeable future. We do have a plan to be cash flow break-even in about 6 to 8 quarters. We made that very public in the process here. Mm-hmm. And so the plan is literally, we've got offices in London, Tokyo, Sydney, Australia, Melbourne, Salt Lake City, Toronto. We are going to accelerate our global expansion. This platform allows us, with over 100 currencies and over 100 languages on the Force.com platform. So we really can do what small companies couldn't do before, okay? And so that, in addition to the organic innovation drive that we have, so literally not only focus on commercial lending or the commercial side of the bank. We do that. We do small business. We do it for the retail bank. And it's the first time there's a single platform where you get a 360 view of the customer through Salesforce. And then any product you select or any complex loan or the most simplistic personal loan can be processed right from there without re-entering data or asking for any new documentation. Tremendous efficiency we bring into the banks that actually help them to feel and look much more like a fintech. Right. Being nimble and fast and customer focused.
Has that become only more important in the midst of the pandemic, Pierre? I mean, I wonder if the business accelerated because banks figured out that they needed to be a little bit more, as you say, nimble and a little bit more tech savvy, both internally and customer facing.
That's the magic of this approach. We go into the bank first. We actually improve the bank employee experience, give them mobility, they go and work from anywhere, anytime, and then we take that improved processes out to the customers through apps and portals. But phenomenal reaction from banks now, especially you can't commute to New York City, London, etc. And Encino bankers can literally stay home, do anything on their phone. I got a picture the other day from a friend of mine, a bank up in New Jersey, Frank Sorrentino of Connect One Bank. Yeah, we know him. Flying in a small plane. Mm-hmm. And they actually, and Frank and Liz was approving loans in the air on an iPhone on Encino. I mean, that's fun stuff, and that's why I love what I'm doing. Are you I know you work with banks that have assets from 30 million to 2 trillion. So are you working, on a day when we're hearing from the big banks, whether it's JP Morgan, Citi, Wells Fargo, are you working with all of these big banks as well? We are, but what I'm telling my community and regional banks is, guys, for the first time, because of the cloud and the pricing models we have, you can now get access to the same sophisticated technology that only big banks could afford in the past. So this truly addresses your growth fears, okay? But we actually address the 4 main pillars that banks look at. It's cost savings, it's efficiency, it's compliance, and then revenue growth. And we can address all 4 depending on the cycle of that bank. And so size drives those decisions.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to let you get back to your victory lap here. Pierre Naudé is CEO of Encino. A heck of a debut here on the NASDAQ. The ticker is NCNO, and just taking a quick check, that stock is
168%.
$52, almost doubling, 170%, as you say, Carol. Right now trading at 83.33. More ahead, including Dave Wilson's chart of the day. He gave us a good tease earlier. I think it's going to be a good one. But what's the song going to be?
Stick around, everyone. You'll find out. And also, of course, we'll count you down to the closing bell. About 35 minutes left in the trading day. And you are listening to Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It's been a bumpy ride for Wall Street as second quarter earnings season kicked off with results from 3 major banks. Stocks are mostly higher. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 382. The S&P is up 16. The NASDAQ is down 19. Pink slips will soon be flying at Wells Fargo. CEO Charlie Scharf says he's looking to slash costs after the bank posted its first loss in the second quarter since 2008. Wells Fargo is the biggest U.S. bank employer with 266,000 workers. It's Richard Branson to the rescue as he looks to save Virgin Atlantic from collapse. The billionaire is putting up $250 million that he got from diluting his stake in Virgin Galactic after the UK government denied him a bailout. Headed for Best Buy? Don't forget your face mask. Starting tomorrow, it'll require all customers in its stores to wear one and will provide masks for all needing. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Economics. All this doom and gloom was out there. Finance.
Do you see this as a technical correction?
Investment.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Lots and lots of talk about what the Fed should and shouldn't do.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and the names that shape the world's markets.
We speak with Professor Schiller of Yale University.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Listen today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Where are today?
Just one cornetto.
Ada, love, your mum's on the phone.
Give it to me. No, the phone, I mean.
Ada, is that you?
Give me cornetto. Your turn, Mum. Sing it.
Oh, from Walls Ice Cream.
Yes, Mum. Love it.
Deliciously creamy, crunchy wafer cone, and the secret chocolate hidden in the tip. Connect with the ones you love this summer. There's just one Cornetto from Walls Ice Cream.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll talk with the creator of HBO's I May Destroy You about how she turned an experience of assault into a comic drama.
I go round and round in circles, feeling comfort and then feeling like I'm in a state of shock at the fact that I'm sharing this story. And then I laugh about it because it's absurd.
Michaela Cole on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where a rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworthy in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Kill O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB? On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Braden and Jared Carrabis cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
30 to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960 to the country, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser, Jason Kelly, and you know, when the market closes, we take a look at the VIX volatility. Dave Wilson's going to dig a little bit deeper into that.
He is indeed. I'm looking forward to this chart that's coming up in just a few minutes.
Song.
I do want to know the song, as does Charlie Pellet.
It's
He's here at 731 Lexington. Did you hear me? Charlie Pellet is here. He's in the building. It's coming from inside the building.
His wife said enough. I'm going to keep the dog. You go back to 7:31.
Yeah, go to the dentist and go to the office. All right. Charlie Pellet, what's up?
All right, fair enough, because I practice social distancing at home. Here's what's going on. We have got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all pushing higher. Look at the Dow right now, up 490 points, up 1.9%. That is the best level of the day. S&P up 29, up 0.9%. NASDAQ up now by 28. That is a gain of about 0.3%. 10-year yield 0.61%. Gold up 0.3%. 18.08 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.4%. 40.25 a barrel. Stocks near the highs of the day. Volatile trading. We've seen stocks bouncing all over the map, but we are seeing gains in energy, materials, and industrial sectors. As for the economic backdrop, Seema Shaw is chief strategist at Principal Global Advisors in London. She was interviewed this morning on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
We're not expecting a continuation of the incredible Q2 performance by any means. But as long as we have central banks standing behind markets, as they very clearly are set to do so, we can't see that there would be a significant correction in the second half of the year. So I think what we're hoping for is just a process of consolidation through to year-end now.
After earnings, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, they're trading mixed. The three of them set aside almost $28 billion for bad loans in the second quarter. J.P. Morgan Chase shares up by 0.5%. Citigroup down 3.7%. Wells Fargo down by 4.6%. Got to mention the airlines. Delta reported this morning its shares trading lower now by 2.7%. Among some of the other airlines, UAL down 0.2%. American Airlines Group down 0.5%. Southwest up by 1.7%. Again, recapping, equities higher. S&P up 27, up 0.9. The Dow up 475, up 1.8%. NASDAQ up by 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. just grabbed her bong, Dave Wilson.
Whoa, listen to you, Dave Wilson. Listen to that chuckle.
Oh, I got a good chuckle out of Dave Wilson there.
Jeez Louise, because you know it's as far from the truth as possible.
I know. That's what makes it funny. If it was true, it wouldn't be funny.
That's true. Dave Wilson, who is that?
Really?
Wasn't that Jimi Hendrix?
Absolutely, Jason.
Okay. Nicely done, Jace. I just couldn't figure out the version.
What was he singing?
Oh, Dylan.
Not one of his songs.
Rolling Stone,
Dylan,
like a Rolling
yeah.
Stone.
Absolutely, the Bob Dylan tune. That's a particular version from the Monterey Pop Festival.
Ah, that's it. I didn't realize he had covered that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He did it in concert,
All right,
absolutely. And I picked that song because it seemed to go with the theme of the latest chart, which is, the U.S. sort of falling into emerging market territory. And this all has to do with volatility. I mean, you talk about the high and mighty U.S. market, and after all, like a Rolling Stone is about, some high-class woman who's not so high-class anymore. So it all seems to work. In any case, what we're talking about here, I mean, you mentioned the VIX index a few moments ago, and indeed, that's sort of the reference point. There's something similar for emerging markets. It's actually based on an exchange-traded fund, the iShares Emerging Markets ETF. So there are options on that particular fund. And so what the folks at Cboe Global Markets do is calculate a version of the VIX based on the options on that ETF. And the ticker is VXEEM. And so when you compare the two, historically, the U.S. has been a less volatile market, which kind of stands to reason. So what the chart does, it looks at two time periods. One is the 5 years leading up to the high for U.S. stocks in February. And indeed, you saw the VIX lower on average. It's a ratio, so it's less than 1. And then you move forward from there all the way to yesterday when this chart was put together, and you find out that the average is exactly 1 at this point. So in other words, there's been no difference in volatility as measured by these two gauges. And it's something that the folks at Variant Perception Research put up on Twitter yesterday, and that got my attention. I mean, they're saying the U.S. might as well be an emerging market. It's like, huh?
Yeah.
At least they're trading more and more that way. That's their point.
No, it's not like, huh? It's like, bring out the bongs now, because this doesn't make any sense.
Wow. That took a turn.
Huh? Just going to say.
Well, in any case, if you want to see what's going on here, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Thought-provoking as always, and a great song to boot. It's usually how it goes with Dave Wilson in his chart of the day. He's going to be back with us just after the close of trading for his stock of the day. Carol?
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Did I just send you sort of like down memory lane with Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan,
no, not even
discussion
close.
Of, were you thinking about Nassau Coliseum again?
I expected a little bit more out of Dave, after that comment, but I just didn't get it.
I think he was just laughing.
He was just done.
Yeah, it's just done.
It's an interesting day, yeah, and I do think
the markets. I mean, I haven't looked in the last few minutes, but I mean, the market certainly got a little more enthusiastic since we started the show. Everything is in the green. The Nasdaq was not in the green when we started, and now the Dow is up almost 2%, 475 points. I know that's a tough gauge to some extent, or an incomplete gauge. The S&P is up almost 1% now.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't take much for the Dow to move in one, just take one of the components that can easily sway that name. So we're going to talk a little bit more about banks. We've got Walter Todd coming up, so we're going to count everybody down to the closing bell. He likes one of the big banks in particular, so we'll get into that. And then
I also want to hear from him what's going on down south.
Yeah, I do too. That's going to be our first question, I think.
He's usually a good gauge of what's going on there. He's there in South Carolina where we know, at least in the Sun Belt, the virus has certainly been surging.
Yeah, South Carolina, I've been talking to my family down there as well, and they are definitely living kind of the life that we were living or have been living, let's put it that way. And then we're also going to hear from the Wells Fargo Chief Financial Officer, John Shrewsbury. So they're going to talk about their quarter. As we know, Wells Fargo has some very company, corporate, culture-specific problems. They've got a new CEO, but this was a tough quarter. The stock's been down, so we'll see what he has to say about what's going on at the company and at the bank and what's to come.
Also, we expect to hear from the president in the 5 o'clock hour, holding a press conference there in the Rose Garden. A lot going on in politics and government and pandemic response, as we know. Let's get to Nancy for some world and national headlines. Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Jason. Joe Biden has released a plan aimed at combating climate change and spurring economic growth, in part by overhauling America's energy industry. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports.
Biden spoke in a Wilmington office tower that had been retrofitted to save energy.
When Donald Trump thinks about climate change, the only word he can muster is hoax. When I think about climate change, the word I think of is jobs. Restoring our crumbling roads and bridges and ports, making it faster, cheaper, and cleaner to transport American-made goods all across the country and around the world. Jobs.
Biden proposed to make the United States, not China, the world leader in electric cars, build 500,000 highway charging stations, and subsidize trade-ins of gas guzzlers. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Burger King has its own plan to address climate change. It's rebalancing the diet of some of the cows by adding lemongrass in hopes of limiting a cow's daily methane emissions by 33%. Cows emit methane as a byproduct of their digestion. The EPA says greenhouse gas emissions from the ag sector made up about 10% of total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in 2018. Ghislaine Maxwell has been ordered to remain in custody while she awaits trial on charges she recruited underage girls for sexual abuse by her longtime friend, disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. Maxwell will have another year behind bars before her trial, which the judge set for July 12th, 2021. The hearing took place remotely, with Maxwell appearing before the judge through a remote hookup from a Brooklyn jail. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
I've always wanted to learn another language, but every time I try, it never sticks. So I decided to give Babbel a try, and I really like the teaching method of the app. I started with the beginner lesson on Babbel, and it starts with simple words and phrases, and soon you're putting those words into a conversation. Each lesson takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and they're all really different, which keeps things interesting. The app is really smart. It actually keeps track of the words I'm struggling with so I can practice them and get better. I chose Babbel because it was created by real language teachers. They built it around real life, how people actually communicate, and what they care about. I can't wait to use my new language skills in the real world. Dos cervezas, por favor.
With Babbel, get conversational in Spanish, French, German, and more. It just takes 10 to 15 minutes a day. Now try Babbel free. Just go to Babbel.com and start learning a new language today. That's Babbel.com. Babbel.com.
With COVID-19.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
What would the world be like if we listened more?
At Honda, our ears are always open to new ideas. Oh, there's one now, knocking on our eardrum. What's that? What if we made a car with cameras instead of wing mirrors? A robot mower that knows when it's time to cut the grass. A self-balancing motorcycle. And what if by 2022, all of our mainstream cars were hybrid or electric? Huh. Great idea. Thanks, ears. Honda. The power of dreams.
How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where our rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworthy in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1968, Hank Aaron hits his 500th home run off of a San Francisco Giant, Mike McCormick.
After the All-Star game, Henry Aaron steals the headlines when he hits his 500th home run of his career. It comes against the Giants.
Hammer and Hank Aaron collected his 500th home run off Mike McCormick in July 14th.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
Mr. Darren Waller, good to have you.
Yes, sir, it's good to be here.
Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Big member of our NFL alumni family, the CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president,
Mr. Eric Price. Good to see
you. Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Indoor gatherings. Wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Don't share food, toys, or other items, and avoid shared surfaces. Open windows for better ventilation. Try to avoid gathering indoors as much as possible. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn. You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. It's been a volatile Tuesday. 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell, but the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ are all advancing right now. S&P 500 index up by 1.1%, up 34 points at 3189. It is turning out to be an up day for NASDAQ, up 46, now higher by 0.5%. And the Dow is up 524 points, up now by 2%. We've got gold up 0.4%, 1809 the ounce, the 10-year yield 0.62%, and crude, West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.4%, 40.27 a barrel. Briefly after earnings, J.P. Morgan Chase up 1.3%, Citigroup down 3.5%, Wells Fargo down 4.3%. Goldman Sachs reports tomorrow. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
Yeah, how about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
The drive to the close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
It is time for the drive to the close. Back with us is a friend of the show, Walter Todd, Chief Investment Officer at Greenwood Capital Associates. He joins us on the phone from Greenwood, South Carolina. Walter, nice to have you here with us. We do want to talk about the markets, but just tell us about life in South Carolina right now.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's getting a little stressful down here, I guess. The last time we talked, I think New York was the hot spot, and so now South Carolina is. But my family, everybody's healthy, so I'm very thankful for that. And we're making it.
And so, from an investor's perspective, and I'm glad to hear everybody's safe and well, Walter. From an investor's perspective, how much pause does this give you as you look across the country? And not to take anything away from your home state or my home state of Georgia, your home state of South Carolina, and the rest of the Sun Belt down there. But it felt like the market yesterday saw those headlines about California, and California being the 5th largest economy in the world, and said, oh, wait, hold on a second. Maybe this isn't so good. Maybe we need to be a little more worried. How do you view it?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jason, when you look, you kind of looked at the headline and you thought that, but then when you kind of looked at the sector performance yesterday, it was actually a lot of the reopening areas like financials and industrials that did the best yesterday. They were actually up. And then, obviously technology took a big hit. So yesterday was very curious. I mean, recognizing the headline reversal in the indices, but underneath the surface, it really had kind of a positive tone as it relates to the virus. And, you're seeing that again today with energy and materials and industrials really kind of, lifting the market up, and some of the areas that have done better under the, worst virus news doing worse.
Yeah, it's interesting if you watch the market. We definitely do see, like we saw yesterday, the market being taken down by a virus head. And I do know that we're kind of transitioning into earnings, certainly because of the bank earnings and the rest of the season to come. I mean, Walter, what are your expectations about what we're going to hear from corporate America about, looking backward, looking forward, about where we go?
Yeah, I think, Jamie Dimon's call this morning was very kind of sobering. He's always very honest and open on his calls, and he talked about the fact that it's very difficult to look out and predict the future. And so I think that's kind of what you're going to hear from management teams. But the issue is, or the potential positive glass half full scenario is that analysts have modeled down pretty significant downturn in earnings, down about 40% overall for the market. And when you see companies come in, for example, JPM down 50% versus the model down 60%, that's a win, for the company on a relative expectation basis. So I think there is the possibility that you could see companies as they report do some better than expected numbers, but it's not going to be uniform. I mean, take Wells Fargo's the other side of that coin today, Citigroup as well. So it's not going to be uniform across the board, but in general, I think we could maybe have a better than a very low expectations for those cyclical parts of the market. Now, the technology side that's another story. Expectations are obviously very high on that front, so that could be a different outcome.
Yeah. And so when you think about how you model a portfolio in all of this, Walter, given what you said about financials, given what you said about technology, are there areas that look, maybe a little bit more ripe than others? I mean, I think about the travel stocks. They've been beaten up. I think about, a lot of the areas, the sort of consumer-facing areas that folks are uncertain about. Where do you look here?
Yeah, I mean, 2020 has been quite a year for portfolio management. I think what you have to do, or what we believe you should do, is take kind of a barbell approach to this, and you're going to have some exposure to those areas that are secular growers like technology and healthcare. But at the same time, despite what it feels like right now with the virus picking up, I think you do want to have some exposure to the cyclical areas as well, whether that be industrials, some financials, energy, etc. So I think you want to play both sides of that.
Right.
At this point, we're avoiding kind of the really deep, like the travel and leisure areas, because I think that's going to take longer to recover. But we think having exposure to both areas is important in a portfolio.
I mean, I guess what's interesting about tech and healthcare specifically, Walter, is that, they can stand to benefit to some extent from this and have, in certain cases, pretty dramatically. And, I even think about this name that went public today, or priced last night and was on the market today, Encino, this little software company. Mm-hmm. I believe the CEO, at least, is based right up the road from you in Wilmington, and that's where he called us from. At least maybe he's just got a nice beach house. But, this is an area where technology has really, as you say, outperformed in part just because of the way we're living.
Sure. Yeah, and there's definitely fundamental basis or tailwinds for healthcare and tech. It's just a question of what do you pay for that? Yeah. And in some cases, you're paying 25, 30, 40 times revenues for some of these companies, and we just think that's a little too much. But there's opportunities, in healthcare, for example. I'll give you, J&J, which we own. That's kind of a value stock within healthcare. Yeah. Trading around 15 or 16 times the reports in a couple of days. So, there's opportunities throughout the market. We just think you need to be careful. Yesterday was kind of a warning shot to say, hey, at some point valuation does matter. Again, hasn't for a while, but it kind of peeks its head up every now and then.
Hey, just quickly, Walter, have you been buying, selling in this environment? I'm just curious because it's interesting you said about the tourist, kind of stocks that you've got to be patient longer, but those are the kind of names that if you are patient, you could get a big payoff longer term. So I'm just curious, got about 30 seconds here, buying or selling that you've been doing.
Yeah. Now, our turnover has been in our large cap portfolio, our kind of main portfolio has been fairly low. We haven't been doing a lot of shifting, but we've been keeping names in check. So we have exposure to Amazon and Apple and those names, but we've been keeping them kind of in check as they've continued to run, so we don't get outsized, exposure to those when they do kind of come in like they did yesterday, for example.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Walter Todd, always good to catch up with you. Glad to hear all is as well as can be expected down there in South Carolina. Walter Todd, Chief Investment Officer for Greenwood Capital Associates, on the phone from Greenwood in the great state of South Carolina, Palmetto State, Carol.
Yeah, Palmetto State, indeed. Interesting to hear him say, though, about what's going on in terms of certainly the virus, but it just mirrors what we've been hearing in the headlines,
totally.
Right? Across, certainly across the country.
And tables turned from when we last talked to him, when we were very much in the same state, and we're cautiously optimistic here in the Northeast, that's for sure.
In the meantime, we're seeing kind of an uptick here, and we're going to pretty much we're pretty much going to end at our highs, or just off our highs of this session. So we've seen a rally into the closing bell. Stick around. Here comes the close.
You may not be getting on.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Are you ready for the realist first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man. Welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man, I'm good.
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
Times Radio, an exciting new national speech station, is here.
Featuring live news,
analysis, conversation,
and the unequivocal world-beating journalism of The Times.
Join Asma Mir and me, Stig Abel.
I'm John Pienaar. Join me on Times Radio.
Join me, Mariella Frostrup.
I'm Giles Corrin.
Hello, I'm Kathy Newman.
This is Michael Portillo.
Join me, Carol Walker.
I'm Hugo Rifkind.
Times Radio is here. Search Times Radio on TuneIn to listen.
Roughly a fifth of renters may lose their homes by September when pandemic-related eviction freezes are set to expire.
Renters in Indiana have until the end of the month before landlords can once again start eviction.
It isn't just the pandemic that brought us to this point. Check out this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
It's Tune In Sports on this day. On this day in 1968, Hank Aaron hits his 500th home run off of a San Francisco Giant, Mike McCormick.
After the All-Star game, Henry Aaron steals the headlines when he hits his 500th home run of his career. It comes against the Giants.
Hammer and Hank Aaron collected his 500th home run off Mike McCormick in July.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
On Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it, sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange as we wrap up trading on this Tuesday, July 14th. Big move for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. Stocks climbed in a volatile session, ending the day at or near session highs. Folks from PTK Acquisition Corp, by the way, ringing that closing bell. S&P up 42 points, up 1.3%. The Dow advanced 557, up 2.1%. NASDAQ up 97 points at the close. That was a gain of just about 0.9%. Banks were mixed after J.P. Morgan Chase reported strong trading results, while Wells Fargo tumbled after cutting its dividend and reporting its first quarterly loss since 2008. Wells Fargo shares tumbled 4.6%, Citigroup down 3.9%, J.P. Morgan Chase up today by 0.6%. Walter Todd is the president and chief investment officer at Greenwood Capital Associates. He was our guest moments ago, right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
You know, Jamie Dimon's call this morning was very kind of sobering. He's always very honest and open on his calls, and he talked about the fact that it's very difficult to look out and predict the future. And so I think that's kind of what you're going to hear from management teams.
And coming up in just a moment, speaking of management teams, we will be hearing from the chief financial officer of Wells Fargo. Again, Wells Fargo shares lower today by 4.6%. Mega cap tech names were mixed today. Today we saw shares of Facebook advancing by 0.3%. Amazon down 0.6%. Among the FANG stocks, Apple was up 1.6%. Amazon down 0.6%. Netflix down 0.1%. And Alphabet, parent of Google, up today by 0.6%. Gold advanced 0.4%, 18.10 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 40.29 a barrel. Again, recapping an up day, stocks closing at the best level. S&P up 42, a gain of 1.3%. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Wild thing, think you move me.
I got a few moves I know you'll like. Shake him, not stir.
Just move on toward your destination.
I can make things move without touching them.
Shaking all over.
Bloomberg Business Week. Movers and Shakers with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed. Time to take a look at some of the movers and shakers for this Tuesday trade. Man, it's already been 2 interesting days. Yesterday we had a rally that stuck around for a long time and then ran out of steam on a virus headline, so we ended kind of near our lows of the day. Today we were kind of bouncing around and we picked up a lot of momentum in that last hour, so we finished pretty much at our highs of the day. Charlie, of course, breaking down those closing numbers. So what does that mean for the S&P 500? It was a broad-based rally, Jason, so we saw a lot of industry groups higher. 437 names in the S&P 500 higher today, 66 lower, 2 unchanged. And if I look at those major industry groups, energy up almost 3.6%, your top performer. Materials up about 2.5%. Industrials were up more than 2%. Bottom of the pack, but still with gains. Communication services up almost 1%. Financials, with all those big bank earnings, were up about 2/3 of 1%. Bottom of the pack, still a gain. Consumer discretionary, also up about 0.2%. So this was definitely a much more risk-on trade today.
Yeah, it's amazing how different it feels today than yesterday. And it did feel like it was a big question mark coming in today because you didn't know what those banks were going to say. And I go back to something Walter Todd said, which is we are in a world, as I guess we always are, of relative expectations. And even though, and I think he described what Jamie Dimon said as conservative and a bit sobering, we did hear, certainly from investors, a little bit of enthusiasm of saying, all right, well, they're realistic. Maybe it's not as bad as we thought. Wells Fargo, of course, we're going to hear from their CFO momentarily. They had a tough go of it, but that seems more Wells Fargo related than underlying market conditions and financial conditions related.
And I would say this is not a financial crisis, right?
True.
The Fed very quickly moved into action to make sure that this was not a financial crisis. And the banks, I know we talked with Anton Schutz and about all of the kind of reserves that banks still have. And I think he has some issues certainly with it. And I respect that. But I also do think it does put them in a much safer place, and based on some of the lessons we learned in the financial crisis. But they certainly are in a much better place, whether or not we have an economic downturn. And we are having an economic downturn, let's not forget. But depending on how long it goes on for, it'll be interesting to hear also from the other CEOs that have been hit really, really hard by this crisis and their businesses basically, coming undone.
I do want to mention Encino, that company debuting. We caught up with their CEO earlier. That stock tripling, by the way, or nearly tripling, up 195, give or take percent, up $60. Obviously happy with the performance, although I have to say, not good banking. I think it's fair to say.
There's a lot of money left on the table.
Leaving money on the table, exactly. So they're going to have some proceeds to invest, but still, that's bigger. That's bigger than you want, I think, fair to say.
And listen, I respect, the CEO talking to us and saying they're, very happy to be a publicly held company, and especially in a marketplace that you probably couldn't have done this a couple of months ago. But we have seen the IPO market pick up. But I agree, Jason, I do wonder about this pricing. But I know they're quick to move on from that and certainly look ahead, right, in terms of their business. I do want to talk about Tesla. This is a name that we watch a lot.
I think we need to get to Dave Wilson real quick so we can make sure to get his stock of the day. Dave Wilson, our stocks editor, right here with us. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Jason, let's talk K-12. This is a company that provides online education for students in kindergarten through 12th grade. Now, the company was founded in 2000, went public in 2007. Ticker is LRN. Learn without the vowels. K-12 went public at $18 a share and is slung on either side of that price over the years. This year, stock began rising in March as the coronavirus pandemic forced school districts across the U.S. to adopt virtual learning. Now, today, K-12 broke a 9-year-old record with help from Andrew Leff's Citron Research, a firm known for calls to sell stocks short. Citron published a report comparing the company to the telemedicine provider Teladoc Health, which is up 150% this year. Citron wrote that it sees K-12 as the online school of choice for the fall semester. Firm said the company's shares were cheaper than those of peers and gave a year-end price forecast of $100. To put that in context, K-12's high today, the record, $41.70. There's a long way to go from here. Stock closed at $39.29. That works out to a gain of 12%.
All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for your market insights, chart, and stock, Carol.
Yeah, let's take a look at Wells Fargo because the stock ended down about 4.6% to $24.25 a share. We know that this company is certainly had a tough few years. It's down about 55% so far in 2020. And the company's CEO said he has set his sights on the bank's cost, looking to cut about $10 billion after the loss that they've reported today. Right now, the CFO is sitting down with Bloomberg News' Shonali Basak.
Chief Financial Officer and Senior Executive Vice President joining us now. John Shrewsbury, thank you for your time today. And we've heard from Citigroup CEO saying this is not a V-shaped recovery. The worst is, we don't want people to think that the worst is absolutely behind us. Is the worst behind Wells Fargo in terms of the sheer extent of the loan loss provisions you've had to make?
the future unfolds the way that we might imagine, which has unemployment probably getting back to around 10% by the end of the year, and maybe GDP growth for all of next year, back up to the call it 2-ish% range off of a very steep drop down this year, then that's accounted for in loan loss provisions today, and we wouldn't expect to have to add much more. We've got about $20 billion set aside for future loan losses. I would distinguish that from the health and the ongoing activity of consumers and businesses, because those charge-offs that we're expecting will occur over the course of the next several quarters, even though banks have set aside for that today.
Yeah, and we should just point out that St. Louis Fed President James Bullard, speaking at an event in New York, basically saying that he's actually happy about banks' approaches to some of these loan loss reserves. So at least one endorsement there from one member of the Fed as to some of the precautions being taken. I am curious about the headcount reductions that we've been reporting here at Bloomberg and that we heard about a little bit earlier. How deep and do you expect them to go? And is there any sort of anticipation here that Wells Fargo would then reflate their base of employees back to another level, or is this sort of a long-term plan that's just going to mean a leaner bank?
It's a steadier, longer-term plan that means a leaner bank, in part because we're inefficient in terms of how we deliver some of our product and service today, in part because we've staffed up to solve some of the problems we've been dealing with over the last couple of years, and in part because banking is changing, and we'll have fewer branches. We'll still have many thousands of branches, but we'll have fewer branches in the future. We've got more activity happening digitally from front to back, meaning that how our customers interact with us and then how we deliver capability is happening in a more tech-driven way. All of those things will lead over time to a smaller headcount base. We have, call it 270-ish thousand people today. Other banks of our size manage to operate at even higher revenue levels with similar balance sheets, but on a substantially smaller footprint. So that will happen over the course of the next few years.
John, there was some relatively positive commentary when it came to the consumer and some of the credit card spend. I'm curious how much of that is actually positive underlying fundamentals versus government intervention, you deferring mortgage payments, for example, or extra stimulus or unemployment benefits that we've seen. And when those run out, are you assuming just inevitable losses that have just pushed out later into 2020?
Yep, so a couple things there. On the spending side, so credit card is recovering, but still way down from where it was in the first quarter, in the middle of the first quarter. Debit card spend, we have the largest debit card network by payments. There, we're back up, call it 10% year over year, which is where we were before the shelter in place went into place. It's not the same payments to the same payees, but consumers, at least right now, are spending at that level. And it's undoubtedly supported by the level of stimulus that is being received through direct stimulus payments, through extra unemployment benefits, and because banks and others are deferring required payments on installment loans, so people don't have to pay their mortgage loan, their auto loan, their credit card loan if they opt not to for a period of time, and that is causing more free cash flow to be available for people really at the lower end of the income spectrum. So that's by design. It's having that effect, but when it abates at some point, which it probably will, unless we've come back up the other side of the V, then there's likely to be some reckoning there.
In terms of that V, and in terms of coming back and giving yourself the perspective, the clarity on whether you can start rewarding investors as well again, is notable the cut you made to your dividend to 10 cents. Some analysts think that this dividend payment could go to zero. Do you agree with that? Is that something that you might have to look to if that V-shaped recovery is even further pushed out into the future?
We don't have an expectation of it going to zero. The level of our dividend has more to do with our long-term earnings medium to long-term earnings forecast and also some recent requirements that were put in by the Fed that govern how big of a dividend banks can have, really anchoring it to be no more than the trailing 4 quarters of profitability, the average of the trailing 4 quarters of profitability. So between these allowance bills, we had a big legal settlement a couple of quarters ago. Our trailing 4 quarters of profitability is relatively low, and so we've struck a dividend proposal that's beneath that, so that there's little risk of it going down from there. The economy could zig or zag in a way where earnings are impacted, and that's further impacted if that rule remains in place, but it's not expected to be that way. The dividend approach, though, really doesn't. It assumes, as we do today, that we have ample capital, so it really isn't as much of a capital issue as it is an earnings issue. We closed the quarter actually with an increased capital level in CET1 percentage terms. That's the constraining capital ratio for big banks. And we're at 10.9% today. Our requirement is 9%. That's about $23 billion worth of extra capital on top of the regulatory requirement. So dividends in particular are more about earnings right now for bigger banks, and a little bit less about capital sufficiency, because between these big allowance bills that we've all had and the relatively large cushion in equity that's been built up since the last crisis, there doesn't seem to be a lot of concern or confusion over levels of capitalization.
So John, with those ratios, real quick though, and do you generally sort of measure yourself based upon that regulatory requirement at 9, or do you measure it against what your peers have reported?
Oh, definitely. We each have our own appropriate capital level, and not to get too wonky, but there's a 4.5% minimum. You add to that the so-called GSIB buffer for bigger banks, and then you add to that the stress capital buffer, which is a new requirement that's just phasing in right now. And the GSIB buffer will be larger for more complex or deemed risky banks, as the stress capital buffer will be larger for more deemed risky and deemed by the Fed and other bank regulators. So some banks have higher capital requirements, and so each of us should be measured in terms of where we are versus our regulatory requirement, because we all have different bundles of risks.
John, we always appreciate you coming on here to talk through your earnings on earnings day here. That's John Shrewsbury. He is the CFO, of course, over at Wells Fargo. All right, coming up here next on this program, Florida.
Television, of course, that was Caroline Hyde, Taylor Riggs, and Romaine Bostick talking with Wells Fargo Chief Financial Officer John Shrewsbury about what's going on at the bank. And we know this has certainly been one of the ones that kind of stood out.
Yes.
And a very different story from what we saw potentially, of course, from J.P. Morgan and Citibank today.
Yeah, a standout, not in a good way. And that's been the case for quite some time. So glad the guys got some time with him. Let's head over and get some time with Charlie Pellet. He's got an update on what's going on after the close. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, and thank you very much. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all surged today. Just want to recap some of what the CFO, John Shrewsbury, had to say out of Wells Fargo. Says he does not expect the dividend to go to zero. Says the dividend is an earnings issue, not a capital issue. Stocks posted their biggest gain in more than a week amid a late session surge led by rallies in the energy, materials, and industrial sectors. Today, the S&P 500 index climbed 42 points, up 1.3%. NASDAQ up 97 points, up 0.9%. The Dow rallied 556, up 2.1%. And to be clear, a lot of those gains really came in the final hour of trading. Tenured on 2/30 seconds with a yield of 0.62%. Gold up 0.4, $18.09 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, $40.30 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, a couple of the issues are colliding for this next guest, Carol. I think it's fair to say the pandemic and our national conversation about inequality. Let's bring in Dr. Christopher Chen, Chief Executive Officer of ChenMed, joining us on the phone from Miami. This is a physician practice that serves low to moderate income seniors managing complex chronic conditions, and that is more important than ever right now. Dr. Chen, really nice to have you with Carol and myself.
Great to be on. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what Miami looks like at this point, because Florida, we're seeing all of the headlines. Dade County, Miami-Dade County, that area is very scary when it comes to this surge in virus cases. What does it look like on the ground?
So, we actually are based in South Florida, although we have, medical centers across 10 different states and 20 U.S. cities. We are based in South Florida, and what we are seeing is, a substantial increase in the amount of, coronavirus infection rates. We're seeing hospitals begin to fill up, and there's certainly a lot of commotion going on here.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask is, how is the health system in Florida being impacted and strained by the virus? Are you guys at capacity, beyond capacity?
So ChemMed is a really unique model. We are what is known as a global risk primary care provider. And what that really means is, the typical healthcare system, it's more of like a mechanic. You kind of pay as you go along. Our financial model is really more of like a warranty type of thing. So in other words, we get a lump sum of dollars to take care of our patients' health, soup to nuts, everything you could imagine. And typically people think of healthcare as only like doctors, pills and procedures and referrals. But we have to take care of things such as, what patients and supplies they could need at home. How do they prevent the coronavirus? How do they prevent, going to the hospital with heart failure during this coronavirus era? And so as ChemMed, as a model, what we do is we focus so heavily on prevention. And because we get this upfront payment, we've been able to pivot our model very aggressively during this coronavirus era and to be able to meet the needs of our patients. So what this means is as hospitals, they're struggling to keep up the coronavirus volume. What they're seeing is substantial reductions in other types of care. We are busier than ever. We find ourselves creating new models to meet patients to substantially reduce the coronavirus infection rates for our low to moderate income seniors, of which, the majority of which, 75% of which, are minorities. And so as you can imagine, right now we're hearing all this data come out that seniors are at risk, people who are sick and with chronic conditions are at risk, minorities at risk. This is exactly the population that ChemMed serves.
Right.
And prior to the coronavirus, we reduced hospitalization rates by 50%.
Well, that's what
preventative model, and now we're doing the same thing, and probably even better during the coronavirus era.
That's fascinating. I am curious. I just want to go back to your model because I do want to hear more about the impact of this. But who's you say it's like a warranty model? Who's paying that up front?
So what happens is we enroll Medicare Advantage patients, and we work with 22 different plans, and we tell the plans, and we say, hey, let's partner with you, and you give us a lump sum of dollars to manage all hospital costs, all physician costs, all medication costs, but also we want the right to be able to pay for things like toilet paper during the coronavirus era. I want to be able to pay for transportation. I want to be able to go to a patient's house so they don't have to leave the home. I want to be able to set up telehealth and televisits and video visits and be able to drop off an iPad. And I don't want to have to bill for that. I don't have to bill for that because I'm not a mechanic. I'm in the warranty business. So we will do essentially whatever it takes to help our low to moderate income seniors, which are predominantly in underserved areas. These are the territories in which there is a 20-year life expectancy differences between, poorer neighborhoods, which are mostly minorities, and richer neighborhoods. And we get to go into those neighborhoods and we get to solve their needs on our dime, which we have a, set amount of dollars to do so. And we're able to substantially improve their outcomes. Our patient experience numbers are in the top decile, quality numbers in the top decile, and as I mentioned before, hospitalization rates substantially lower than what you would typically find. And what we discovered is we actually equalize racial disparities. So in our low to moderate income minority patients actually get as good outcomes, if not in many cases better, than higher income areas because we're in this preventative model.
And so let's talk about that specific point a little bit if we can, Dr. Chen. So is that owing to the type of medicine you're practicing or the different economics or both?
So the economics allows us to practice a different kind of medicine. So because as doctors, we're not paying as we go along like mechanics, right? You got to change your oil filter. You got to change this muffler. This piece broke. You're just paying as you go along. Basically, we're in the warranty business. So a whole plan comes to us and says, here's a set amount of dollars. You need to solve for what patients really need. And in reality, what we decided to do was we said, wow, I can spend a lot more money on prevention. I'd rather have my patients not go to the hospital with coronavirus by preventing the coronavirus than dealing with it after it happens. So immediately after the coronavirus hit, we sent out masks, we sent out PPE and preventative things to our patients. We started calling them. We did like daily love calls to make sure they weren't lonely and feeling depressed at home. These are things that you typically cannot bill for, but we can do. And we can do it in a way that prevents the problems from occurring, because we found that prevention is much more cost-effective than actually treating the catastrophic events once they really occur.
So, Dr. Chen, when you look at how the virus has been handled on a national scale, what's your takeaway?
Well, here's what I think. I believe that just like in every other disease, whether it be heart failure, which is actually the single largest contributor to healthcare costs in this country, heart disease, or cancer, or COPD, prevention is the best way to manage these problems. And so for our patients, we have aggressively managed prevention. We've implemented something called H3, happy, healthy, and at home for our seniors. And so our entire care model pivoted in 1 week from an in-office, in-center patient care model to something that says, hey, we're going to meet you at your place of need, whether it be at your house, whether it be on your phone, whether it be on an iPad, and we will see you in the centers if needed. And so we will do all of those things to keep you healthy, happy, and at home. And the whole effort there is to try and prevent the coronavirus infection. And so I believe as a country, that's an important part of how we're managing disease as a whole.
All right,
and our model works. It works across so many, and we're going to grow very effectively, whereas everybody else are shutting down primary care centers.
Hold on a second. Dr. Chen, we actually want to talk about that growth. We've got to do a little bit of news, but we'll continue this conversation because I am curious about your growth rates and whether this is a model that maybe you think can be applied across the country, because I know you work in certain areas of the United States right now. I think they're in about 60 centers, 8 U.S. states, so we'll talk about that. We are talking with Dr. Christopher Chen. He is the CEO of Chen Med, joining us on the phone from Miami. So we'll continue this. Listen, healthcare, Jason, you and I talk so often that this is kind of one of the areas that really needs some changes. And I do feel like the pandemic is creating those changes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a sense of urgency that maybe we didn't have before. And, you know, as I said, you know, these two crises, the pandemic and questions around social justice, they are colliding here in a big way in healthcare. More ahead with Dr. Chen. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It was a choppy day for stocks, but it ended well, with energy and industrial shares leading the advance. The Dow Industrial surged 557, the S&P climbed 42, the Nasdaq gained 98. German fitness chain RSG has won an auction to buy bankrupt Gold's Gym for $100 million. If a judge approves, Dow Jones reports Gold's Gym would exit Chapter 11 with 61 owned and about 600 franchise gyms and less debt. Owners of certain older iPhones could now submit claims under a settlement in a lawsuit that accused Apple of slowing down older phones. CNN reports owners can seek payments of about $25 per device. Burger King wants you to enjoy a Whopper while saving the planet. It's begun selling burgers sourced from less flatulent cows. They get that way by eating a diet supplemented with lemongrass, which reduces their greenhouse gas emissions. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Economics.
All this doom and gloom was out there.
Finance.
Do you see this as a technical correction?
Investment.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Lots and lots of talk about what the Fed should and shouldn't do.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, Lisa Abramowitz, and the names that shape the world's markets.
We speak with Professor Schiller of Yale University.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Listen today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. In-depth analysis, concise.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride?
Or perhaps something a little more intense. Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Thanks to National Lottery players, the Emerald Centre are now providing emergency food supplies and support for people in Bedfordshire like Alan. Thank you. And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects in England and across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1968, Hank Aaron hits his 500th home run off of a San Francisco Giant, Mike McCormick.
After the All-Star game, Henry Aaron steals the headlines when he hits his 500th home run of his career. It comes against the Giants.
Hammer and Hank Aaron collected his 500th home run off Mike McCormick on July 4th.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Times Radio, an exciting new national speech station, is here.
Featuring live news,
analysis, conversation,
and the unequivocal world-beating journalism of The Times.
Join Asma Mir and me, Stig Abel.
I'm John Pienaar. Join me on Times Radio.
Join me, Mariella Frostrup.
I'm Giles Corrin.
Hello, I'm Kathy Newman.
This is Michael Portillo.
Join me, Carol Walker.
I'm Hugo Rifkind.
Times Radio is here.
Search Times Radio on TuneIn to listen.
How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where our rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworthy in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen.
Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
So, Jason, we talk a lot about the wellness model when it comes to healthcare, but I think a lot of folks have had a tough time doing it. Dr. Chen over at Chen Med seems to be doing it.
Well, especially because we often talk about wellness when it comes to the affluent, and this is a model that takes into account a much broader swath of the population. I'm really into this, so looking forward to continuing the conversation with him. First, let's get to Charlie Pellet. He's got an update on the headlines. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there. Wells Fargo says it will start cutting expenses in the second half of this year and aims to eventually trim at least $10 billion of costs. Today, Wells Fargo reported its first quarterly loss since 2008 as loan loss provisions soared, with the bank expecting a more severe downturn from the coronavirus pandemic. Moments ago, Bloomberg Radio and Television spoke with Wells Fargo CEO John Shrewsbury, who had this to say about loan loss provisions.
We've got about $20 billion set aside for future loan losses. I would distinguish that from the health and the ongoing activity of consumers and businesses, because those charge-offs that we're expecting will occur over the course of the next several quarters, even though banks have set aside for that today.
And he also told us he does not expect its dividend to go to zero. Mixed day for a lot of the banks after earnings. J.P. Morgan Chase up today by 0.6%. Citigroup was down 3.9%. Wells Fargo reported earnings this morning. Its shares lower today by 4.6%. Tomorrow we will be hearing from Goldman Sachs. Stocks posted their biggest gain in more than a week amid a late session surge. S&P up 42, a gain of 1.3%. The Dow up 556. That was a gain of 2.1%. NASDAQ up 97, a gain of 0.9%. 10-year now down 1/32. The yield 0.62%. Gold up 0.4, $18.09 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.9%, $40.45 a barrel. Recapping, equities higher. S&P up 42, up 1.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is indeed. Charlie, thank you so much. I want to get back to our conversation Jason and I are having with Dr. Christopher Chen. He is the CEO of Chen Med. Their company focuses on bringing healthcare to the neediest populations. It's often low-income seniors managing some complex chronic conditions. And he joins us on the phone in Miami. So, Dr. Chen, we often have conversations with folks in the medical community about this whole idea of, a wellness model, keeping people well rather than bringing them, to your offices when you're sick, to medical offices when people are sick. But it's been such, I feel like, a tough road to get to it. What's been tough about the process that you guys have instituted, and what do you think about the successes that you've had that can be applied maybe across the country?
Right. Well, we know that healthcare today is very expensive. We know that the patient satisfaction on healthcare is not improving, and it could be much better. We also know that what we are delivering in terms of quality and population health outcomes is not leading other wealthy nations. And so the only way that you're going to be able to substantially improve health, improve patient experience, improve quality is by investing in a prevention model. And this is really only possible when you're given a financial arrangement that what we do is called global risk. That allows us to have the entire healthcare dollar to not just invest in doctors and procedures and pills, but it allows us to invest in normal preventative services, which we believe contributes about 80% of a patient's health. So let me give you an example. You can either wait for patients to have heart failure and show up in the emergency room with difficulty breathing, admit them to the ICU, and that admission would cost between $20,000 and $30,000. Or you can invest in patients on the front end on things such as diet, on good preventative medications, on frequent visits, on being accessible and available to your patients by going to their home to make sure that they have healthy food in their refrigerator. And that is far more cost-effective than paying for that $20,000 to $30,000 hospitalization, sometimes 2, 3, or 4 times a year. And so that's what we've done in our population. We have geo-targeted specific populations that are grossly underserved, low to moderate income seniors with multiple chronic conditions, in which over 75% of them are minorities. And there is usually a 20-year life expectancy gap. Right. It targeted those communities with this care model. And what we have found across our multiple cities in November, we will be in 20 cities across 10 states. What we have found is this model works, and it works in all of the cities that we are in. It's not just it works here or there and in Atlanta and not in Chicago. What we're finding is this preventative, holistic model based on this beautiful financial design allows us to invest in patients and get results that actually will equalize our results to wealthier neighborhoods. So what does it mean? Our poorer neighborhoods have results that are as good, if not better, than the wealthiest neighborhoods in the same cities that they're in. And so this is a model we believe that can replicate itself across the country. There are multiple others who are emulating our template that we in our example, and we're happy to that they're trying to do this, and we're excited that more people are attempting this concept called value-based care. And we believe that it is relevant even more so because the coronavirus has amplified all of the problems that we have in healthcare today in terms of disparities. And therefore, our need and our relevance has increased. And we believe that our growth rate, we've had a compound annual growth rate of about 30% for the last 7 to 8 years. We believe that growth rate will actually increase because of the coronavirus.
So, Dr. Chen, before we let you go, we've only got about a minute and a half left. This all makes sense. The data back it up. And yet preventative medicine has not been an overall winning argument. Is that just because of the entrenched economics of this system?
Absolutely. There are billions, if not trillions of dollars, or at least billions of dollars spent in every single U.S. city today that is built on the mechanic model. I see you one, I do one, I get paid for one. I fix your transmission, I fix this, I fix as you go along. And so the entire economic model, the entire workflow, the entire system is built around this.
So how do you break it?
Very, very difficult. Right now, we are working with certain hospitals that are pioneering this. It takes a lot of boldness. It takes a lot of courage. The hospitals that have made this shift, they're seeing significant, improvement. I know Intermountain and Geisinger. Those are two beautiful examples. We are working with Ohio Health today, and they have taken that first step. And to really pivot their model to a preventative model to substantially lower the cost of care and improve outcomes for their patients. And so that's what our model is about, and that's what they're trying to do right now.
Right.
Seeing great progress. The problem is it takes courage. And if you build your entire model on one specific type of care, it takes a lot of courage, even during the coronavirus era, to pivot your model to something that is sustainable long term.
Yeah, and no, absolutely. And listen, the economics have to meet the need to some extent. So we look forward to catching up with you. Best of luck. Really appreciate the time. This is a critical issue, we know, and something we will continue to follow here on this show for sure. Dr. Christopher Chen, CEO of ChenMed, joining us from Miami. Carol.
Great to hear somebody who's figuring it out. So look forward to maybe checking in with him. But I agree, it's an entrenched system that it's very difficult to make these changes. But you got to start somewhere, and hopefully
you do. They need to prove that the economics work for big hospitals and big systems, and to fight the entrenched interest. It's just that simple.
Yeah. All right, let's get back to world and national news headlines. Let's toss things over to Ed Baxter in San Francisco. Hey, Ed.
Hi, Carol. Hi, Jason. I'm going to stay with you in Florida. The rush to open there, according to Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, has not gone exactly as planned.
I think the fact that things have sort of not gone according to plan, or maybe people have been aggressively non-compliant, has created a scenario under which this virus has grown much, much quicker than I think people anticipated.
Now, Florida's posted a record number of deaths day to day. Rolling 7-day average also set a record. Governor Ron DeSantis blames people for not following the guidelines. Along with a human toll, this could put a damper on the NBA, theme parks, beaches, and the GOP nomination celebration. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has added four more to the 14-day quarantine list. And New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy on ABC said this morning the state and Connecticut are totally on board.
We knew when we opened our state up, we'd take on more risk of transmission of the virus. But there's an added element from folks who are coming in from out of state, from hotspots. And we'll take that very seriously.
Now, the state of Hawaii has delayed its pre-flight testing program to avoid the 14-day quarantine order. You now must quarantine until at least September 1st. Aloha. And in announcing a new climate and energy policy today, Joe Biden said that not rebuilding will happen without the virus control and leadership from the President of the United States.
Mr. President, please listen to your public health experts instead of denigrating them. Do your job, Mr. President, because if we can't deal with the public health crisis, we can't deal with the economic crisis.
In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
How long will it take for the...
As shops open up again, how do we all stay safe? Fontaine runs a craft store.
We've made the shop COVID safe. If you can't keep 2 meters apart, make sure it's 1 meter with extra precautions. Know the number of customers allowed in at any one time. Use the hand sanitizer at the entrance and use contactless payments. I'm loving serving customers again, but please, to keep us open, we've all got to keep to the guidelines.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Tuesday evening by the scruff of the neck. Picture your dream career and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Times Radio, an exciting new national speech station, is here.
Featuring live news,
analysis, conversation,
and the unequivocal world-beating journalism of The Times.
Join Asmamir and me, Stig Abel.
I'm John Pienaar. Join me on Times Radio.
Join me, Mariella Frostrup.
I'm Giles Corrin.
Hello, I'm Kathy Newman.
This is Michael Portillo.
Join me, Carol Walker.
I'm Hugo Rifkind.
Times Radio is here.
Search Times Radio on TuneIn to listen.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man, I'm good.
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where a rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworthy in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
From the producers of Bikram and the Sterling Affairs.
The gold medal goes to Mary Lou Retton.
Oh, my God. A legendary coaching team.
Caroli changed the direction of gymnastics in the United States.
A decorated program.
Get the gold medals ready again.
But the gold came at what cost?
The problem was because they went unchecked.
A 30 for 30 podcast in association with ESPNW. Heavy metals inside the Caroli gymnastics empire.
Search 30 for 30 to listen today.
Roughly a fifth of renters may lose their homes by September when pandemic-related eviction freezes are set to expire.
Renters in Indiana have until the end of the month before landlords can once again start eviction.
It isn't just the pandemic that brought us to this point. Check out this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelleton. Up Tuesday, stocks had their biggest gain in more than a week amid a late session surge led by rallies in the energy, materials, and industrial sectors. S&P 500 index jumped 1.3% today, up 42 points to 3197. Dow Industrials up 556, up 2.1%. NASDAQ up 97. That was a gain of 0.9%. 10-year down 1/32 with a yield of 0.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to switch off our streamer. We built some good portfolio for euro. We have 3 positions, so that's good, more profit for us. That's okay if we didn't make any money today. Tomorrow will be another day and we'll make more money. All right. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all. I'll speak to you all tomorrow, as always, 8 o'clock UK time. Okay, have a great evening. Bye-bye.
About one of America's richest men opening up about COVID-19. And it's just a fascinating read.
All right, Joel Weber is here with us, the editor of Bloomberg Business Week. So set this up for us, Joel. What drew you to this story? I mean, it's obvious. It's amazing.
It's funny because Max and I we chatted briefly about this earlier today, and he was like, I was in